Good evening and welcome to your special Voice of the Voter election results coverage tonight. I'm Brian Nakona with Amanda Hill and Phil Hirschkorn to talk about the results that we anticipate coming down tonight on the ranked choice voting election, which we've been following for several days at this point.
Yeah, this is around the time we signed off on June 9th, election night, knowing only the first round results in the two governors' races and the CD2 Democratic primary.
That is a very good point. And we just got an update, about 10 minutes ago, Phil? What did she say?
Well, the thing is, we're not just waiting for those three big races, two statewide and one half the state. There's a couple legislative races. I don't even know which ones, but they're also in a ranked choice runoff situation. So they've decided to do all five. And I think the delay right now is because we were told a few minutes ago because of those legislative races, if I understood the Chief Deputy Secretary of State correctly.
And what's interesting about that is you actually did the math on this because they started one of those races and it took about 40 minutes to do their proofing process, which is what it's called. So for her to come out 10 minutes ago and say, okay, we're starting the second one, we can deduce maybe another 40 minutes there, or from here another 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, you guys know in the newsroom I made a patience playlist
Appreciate it.
earlier in the night to keep us awake. We had Patience from Guns N' Roses. We had The Waiting is the Hardest Part from Tom Petty.
Which has been stuck in my head all night now.
We got to keep our adrenaline going. But, in fairness, it's been 9 days since election night. They've only worked 7 days. They didn't work through last weekend. I don't know why, but they didn't. Tomorrow's a state and federal holiday, Juneteenth, so they really want to get it done tonight. There have been questions. We don't know the answers to the costs of ranked choice voting runoffs. I mean, obviously, they're mostly staff people who are paid their salary to do these elections, but undoubtedly there'll be some overtime costs. I think we learned in the 2018 ranked choice runoff, the first one that we had in the Jared Golden race, there was something like $400,000 plus in additional costs, if I remember correctly. Our Christian Hart is in Augusta. He has some more information on that when we get to him. But that's one of the many complaints about ranked choice voting.
What it takes to do this.
Yes.
As the way we do our elections now, at least our primaries.
That's right.
It doesn't get carried over into the general election. And this whole process has been transparent from the perspective of the Secretary of State's office. They've had a YouTube stream up that we've had a link to available for you. We've had a reporter there every day tracking it, reporting it as well.
And anyone from the public is welcome to go there and watch the process.
They made that as public as possible, I think, for people to be part of it.
Like watching paint dry, unfortunately.
Well, and a number of people commented on that. A former painter was in the room earlier this weekend.
I didn't know that.
And we interviewed him, and he said, I have made a career out of watching paint dry, so this is right up my alley. So, no one's been fooled by the fact that this is a slow, methodical process.
We should might way to explain why. I mean, there are 487 municipalities in the state of Maine. All of them have either thumb drives, which were attached to the optical scanners. So everyone in Maine votes by paper, right? And so you're either in like Portland and Bangor and larger places, you have the optical scanner that counts the votes, so you get a thumb drive. And in the smaller towns, they still count them by hand. So it's either thumb drives or ballots. But the catch is, the law says only law enforcement can transport those materials to Augusta. We're a pretty large state, right?
A lot of mileage to put.
A lot of mileage. 487 places converging on Augusta. So that's the logistics of doing this. They started the uploading, I think, earlier than we expected, which was last Friday. But here we are a little later than they had hoped, which was Wednesday. I think it's now Thursday. This is sort of the last day that they thought they would be doing this, and they are, and it's almost midnight.
And there were a handful of cases that they told us about just through this week that they had to go back to towns, make another trip to a town to pick up either the physical ballots because there was an issue with that thumb drive that Phil was just explaining, or the wrong thumb drive was delivered and they had to go back to the town to get it. So that's been all part of the process.
Yeah.
Good.
I was just going to say, we do have Christian ready to go, but before we do, let's kind of recap these races here. We've got CD2, which at last check on Tuesday, it was Joe Baldacci who was leading that. Who knows, out of the ranked choice voting, what's going to happen. So we have Matthew Dunlap, Jordan Wood, and Paige Loud actually conceded shortly after Tuesday. And then we have in the governor race.
Well, let's just take just on the minute, Amanda.
Sure.
So Joe Baldacci, what they're looking at, what we're showing you is a snapshot of those first round votes. This is the tally as it stood on June 9th, and in the days afterward as the first round votes came in. State Senator Joe Baldacci of Bangor in first place, not by a lot. Matthew Dunlap behind him, the state auditor, former Secretary of State, former state legislator, about 2,000 votes behind him. But he's only, this is very interesting, he's only 293 votes ahead of former congressional staffer Jordan Wood. And Paige Loud, as you mentioned, she's out. So the first thing that's going to happen is her second choice votes will be allocated, 7,874 of them, well, if they're all filled out, but potentially that many. And, you know, Jordan Wood's hope is that he gets more of them, say 300 or more of them than Matt Dunlap, and then he would leapfrog Matt Dunlap and be in the final round against Joe Baldacci, who, as I said, is only 1,800 votes of Matt Dunlap. That's the hope. Everyone I've talked to, at least in the Democratic campaigns, sees a path in this race and the other one we'll talk about, the governor's race, sees a potential path to victory.
And that is the million-dollar question I think we've been talking about since last Tuesday, is those who chose to do ranked choice, when they voted, who was their second choice person? Because that will really determine where things
Yeah, and there's a real cultural difference here. Democrats have embraced ranked choice voting. Republicans tend to reject it more than the Democrats do. So we expect a much higher frequency of ranked choice votes to be in the pool, if you will, when they run the Democratic numbers. You've got 215,000 votes in the first round. I think, you know, I'm just going to guess here, 90% could have second choice votes. A high percentage, I think, is what we expect. In the Republican race, which we'll talk about later, but, you know, fewer of those. So anyway, do you want to talk about the Republican race, where it stands, before we go to Christian?
Let's talk about the governor race. Go ahead and start with the Republicans,
Well, sure. So Bobby Charles, who has never served in Maine government, but has served in Washington in a variety of posts. He's 65. He was an assistant secretary of state. He worked in both the Reagan White House, that was as an intern, and later the Bush White House. That's the first President Bush. He was a naval intelligence officer, has a strong Washington resume, but none in Augusta. And that's a point of bragging rights. It was for 6 of the 7 Republican candidates.
Right.
So if we look at the first round results, the snapshot, you'll see that Bobby Charles got 38% of the vote and has quite a large lead at the end of the first round. Governor of Florida, they're neck and neck, both around 20%. And the question is, when those lower candidates are allocated and then knocked off in the first rounds, will Bush and Midgley pick up enough of those second and third choice votes to catch up or get close enough to Bobby Charles? The first question will be, who's going to be in the final round with Bobby Charles? Presumably Midgley or Bush, but is that lead too much, 22,463 votes, for either one to catch? Bobby Charles is certainly very confident that he's got this all wrapped up, and he came out today and talked about ranked choice voting and how much he doesn't like it. And that's, you know, as I said earlier, not unusual for the Republicans. Bobby Charles said he voted 1 for himself all across
the ballot.
Told his supporters to do the same. And the question is, how many Republican voters even participated in the ranked choice process? I mean, there are fewer votes to begin with. You know, there were only 126,000 votes in the Republican primary. That's 90,000 fewer than the Democratic primary. So there was lower turnout, and we expect lower participation in the ranked choice process.
Was it surprising to you that Bobby Charles came out, of these candidates, to complain this afternoon about ranked choice and how long it takes, when he has such a lead coming out of day one, and that we didn't hear instead from one of the other candidates that's further down?
Well, I think you could say it was maybe self-serving for Bobby to say that, because his argument is we should do things the old way. First round is the round. Plurality wins. He's got a plurality right now. So he would have been declared the winner last Tuesday, which is what he would have wanted, which is what he did want. And I think he's a little frustrated that perhaps the inevitable has been, you know, taken 9 or 10 more days, but he also just doesn't like the idea of ranked choice. A lot of Republicans don't.
Let's look at the Democratic race. Nirav Shah was the leader as of Tuesday. If we have those numbers, we can bring those up. He had 26.8% of the vote. And behind him, Hannah Pingree, Troy Jackson, and Shenna Bellows were all kind of right there with each other, 23, 21, and 20. And they were the 3 who were campaigning with each other as well.
That's right. Right. So this is what you're talking about. There's Nirav Shah. the former head of the Maine CDC. He is 7,625 votes ahead of Hannah Pingree. That's a nice little lead, 3.5%, but he's by no means out of reach because, again, the larger volume of Democratic voters, 200,000 plus Democratic voters. There's a lot of second and third choice votes to go around. And so Hannah Pingree is confident that she can catch up to him. But before we get to that, the first thing that's going to happen is Angus King III, the senator's son, making his first run for office, has 17,000 votes. So when they push the button, those second choice votes will be allocated. And the first big question is who survives that first round, or I should say second round, Shenna Bellows or Troy Jackson. Troy is only 917,000 votes ahead of Shenna Bellows right now for third place. So you can do the math. She could easily catch up to Troy Jackson, right? And leapfrog him. And then whoever survives in third place is going to have a lot of second and third choice votes to be allocated. And, ideologically, Troy Jackson and Shenna Bellows are somewhat closely aligned, right? So the thinking, right, I said earlier, everyone has a path. So both campaigns think that they'll get a good chunk of the others' votes.
The remaining.
Right, and maybe that's enough for one of them to leapfrog Hannah Pingree and be in the final round against Nirav Shah. So that's the kind of thing we want to be looking for when they stand up in a few minutes and push the button and show us finally who the winner is. They'll help us explain it. They'll explain it to us a little bit after the fact. They're going to show us the winner first, and then we've been told they'll give us a little explanation of round by round how they got there.
How the numbers went, which will be very helpful.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, let's check into the room. Christian Harsa has been there all day, frankly, all week he's been there, and he's been watching this process very closely. He's been speaking with people there. So, Christian, what's the room like right now? Are we getting close at this point?
Yeah, we are getting close. How close? We're minutes, probably longer than that. We have had 5 races that have to get proofed in for these ranked choice voting elections, and we're currently on the 5th one. We've already gone through the governor's Democratic primary, the Republican primary, then CD2, and we just wrapped up Senate District 4 not too long ago, and that represents towns such as Dexter, Exeter, and Glenburn, and that leaves just one more before we can finally start getting those results. Now, I do want to preface, there is a little bit of a lull between when that final town and district is proofed to when we get those results, but that's feeling like it's going to be minutes. But you can feel in this room the energy has really changed. There's actually been a hush as people are anticipating maybe we're going to get that last election race proofed here. But we have many cameras here, many campaigns here, all eagerly awaiting to see what these results will be. We will be live here the whole entire evening when we get those results. So everyone watching at home should definitely tune in. But for now, I don't have any updates of what's going to happen. So I'm going to toss it back to you guys, but keep watching.
Christian, if you're able to stick around, I do have a quick follow-up question. Are you seeing any of the candidates we're talking about in the room with you right now? Did any of them come here at midnight?
I'm going to take a quick look around. We don't have any candidates in the room just yet, but we have been told that many, or at least a few of the leaders of the Democrats, if they win, are going to be in the room. If they win, we have been told that Bellows, Jackson, and Shaw would do that. We have not heard a confirmation on whether Pingree would be here if she wins.
Yeah, like a Jack in the Box. They're just going to pop
I know
up.
where they're going to appear from, but they're not there now.
Taking a little car nap, which maybe you should too, Christian.
Can I ask Christian a question?
Yeah, of course.
That was gone long ago.
Christian, I know you did some reporting earlier. On what we know about the past cost of these processes. This is more involved than the ones we've watched before. It was just CD2 with Jared Golden typically. What do we know about what this costs? Because that's a question we've been getting from viewers, and certainly Republicans like Barbie Charles are saying it's a problem.
The cost of this election is still to be determined. It's not over yet, so we don't know quite what the end cost will be. But in 2018, they did have to do a ranked choice runoff in this sense, and that cost, I believe it was $445,000, over $400,000 for that 2018 election. But for this one, it's taking a few more rounds, so one could assume it's going to cost a little bit more. Plus, inflation exists, but we don't have that number quite just yet.
So is that like overtime for the staff or for the police officers that by law have to drive the election materials back and forth?
You know, a lot of those details are something that still has to be figured out by the Secretary of State's office. Every year is different, so that's something that they're still tabulating. One of the other costs is how much does a recount cost? If there is one requested, that's also something that the Secretary of State's finance office is currently trying to figure out, but I wasn't able to get something definitive just yet.
Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead. No.
Well, no, I mean, you know, as Christian knows, the complaints about ranked choice voting we've talked about, but I think we should take a moment and talk about what some of the attributes are, at least for people who like this. And I would say, you know, two come to mind. One is that by requiring the winner, right, to get to 50%, even if you don't like this process or think it's convoluted or confusing, but by getting the end result that you have a 50% winner, well, that's majority rule. That's someone who has broad support in their party, or if it's a general election, the general election, and that's maybe a plus for democracy. Proponents would say. And the other is that to the extent that you have to have runoffs, you know, this is quicker than, believe it or not, than having a runoff weeks and months and continue to campaign and pay for ads, and typically runoffs are even lower turnout. I mean, we have good turnout in Maine, but runoffs traditionally are much lower turnout than the election, the primary we just had, and so, you know, you get something get like 10%. So do you want 10% of the electorate picking your nominee for governor? Yeah, maybe not.
To that point, you know, you think about the numbers the percentages we were just talking about of, you know, without ranked choice, we potentially could have top candidates who got 20% of the vote. So that percentage represents people and voters. So getting to that 50 obviously is a big deal for those who support this process that we're going through.
Well, we keep talking about Bobby Charles talking about ranked choice voting earlier today, and I do believe we have a soundbite from him that if Cam, you have it ready to go, we could pull up and play.
This is him complaining about
ranked choice voting is simply wrong for Maine. Everything that has happened over the past 9 days has proven it. Maine voters cast their ballots on June 9th. It is now June 18th. We still do not have a final certified result. 9 days. No other state uses this process in its primaries. Only 3 use it at all. And no state suffers this kind of wait. States like Florida, with 13.4 million registered voters versus our 949,000, count every vote on election night. They have winners before midnight. After endless litigation trying to stop it, Maine's government stands alone, the only state in the United States.
Okay, we had to cut out of that because there is movement happening in the room. We're going to toss it over to Christian.
Formatting the spreadsheets, getting these ready. There's several spreadsheets that have to go in, so we're not going to hit the button right away. So just thank you for your patience. But this is like in moments we are doing. In minutes or in moments? 1 minute.
We were told, just right there, if you guys weren't able to quite catch it, that now that they're done with all 5 of those elections, it's minutes that we will be able to start getting those results here in Augusta for those ranked choice elections. Now, those are the primary elections for both the Democrats and the Republicans, but also the Democrats running in the 2nd Congressional District. And then we have those 2 Republican primaries for those main legislative races here, both the House 58 and the Senate District 4. Now, they've been working for 5 days going through these tabulations here, and so they've been working on trying to get these through. Now, this proofing stage is making sure that what was cast on election night last week, 9 days ago, matches what they have in the computer that is going to run this simulation. Now, we've been told that it's all going to run all at once, and then they're going to read off the results, starting with the winner and then breaking down the ranked choice tabulations that led to that winner getting to 51%, that majority.
So I want to point out Bobby Charles, where we cut out of his soundbite there, he talked about, in engineering terms, this ranked choice tabulation has multiple failure points, is what he called it, because so many things have come up, so many things have had to be double checked, all these numbers, but others might see that as checks and balances, multiple checks and balances through this system.
Election integrity, even. You know, just because someone, I think Biddeford was an example, I think the wrong thumb drive was sent, We just went and picked up the right one. There was another town where I think there was an issue with paper ballots. We'll just go back and get the ballots.
And the deputy from the Secretary of State's office, who's been heading up this week,
Kate McBride.
made it very clear of there were no missing drives. There was some misinformation circulating. She said just the wrong one was delivered. So we, to your point, we went and got it. But it's that checks and balance process. In the multiple checking of this.
Because we've heard them admit mistakes can be made in terms of counting. You know, these people who are counting paper ballots by hand, they can make a mistake. And so to go through this entire process where they're double checking, it seems like a checks and balances.
And my understanding is what we're about to see should be the final result, but any campaigns that have questions or issues have 5 days to raise a challenge. So hopefully it'll be over.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll be decisive without any
There will
questions.
be a collective groan.
And by the way, if it's a tie, guess how they decide after all of this? First, second, third, fourth round votes?
You mentioned this earlier, and I was shocked.
Yeah, well, by lot. I said a coin toss, but the law says by lot. We had a city council race in Portland a few years ago,
Yes.
where it was tied,
Right.
and the clerk literally came out of City Hall with a salad bowl and put the different names of the two candidates, and I forget who reached in and picked it out, but that's how we decided who one
After
of our,
all of these processes.
who one of our city
Yep.
councilors was for 3 years in Portland, just a few years ago.
Well,
So
hopefully we don't have a tie tonight.
that
And
we
can
called it the
just-
salad bowl primary.
Right. Well, we don't need a repeat of that.
We don't.
So again, to clarify what we're waiting on now, they've done the proofing process, which is what we just saw on the board. They had all the counties and then those two districts that need to be finalized there. And the way they have described it to us is they will hit the button, as they've been saying all along, and all the tabulations of the data they've been inputting over the last 5 days will be tabulated to the ranked choice, and we should hear the winner for a race and then see the process that it went through.
Right. So the woman who was just speaking with the board, she's Shenna Bellows number 2. That's the Chief Deputy Secretary of State, Kate McBride. She's been with the office for several years. She's also the Chief of Staff to Shenna Bellows. Shenna Bellows, as people know who are paying attention, she's one of the candidates for governor. So sensibly, she recused herself. She's not in the building, as far as you know. She's not involved in this. So Kate McBride will be one of the lead presenters, and the other is Julie Flynn, who's run Maine state elections for 31 years.
Jeez.
And so that's who we expect to be, so to speak, pushing the button. They're going to show us the winner first, and then we're told they'll spend a little time going backwards and saying, okay, let's now show you round by round what happened, whether that's a spreadsheet or on a screen or just verbally. We've been told to expect paperwork afterward, but hopefully they'll
Right.
spend a minute or two to help us and our audience understand, especially if somebody
That's a
leapfrogs
huge
someone, how
part.
that happened.
That's a huge part. We've heard from, I think,
Yeah.
a number of viewers just saying, all right, can we see the process? Like, show
Right.
us the work.
Right.
So if we could see some of that tonight, I think that would be
Right, like we
an
were hoping
interesting
more
part.
for American Idol or remember the show Star Search?
Oh, yeah, big
right, and
fan,
you'd have
right?
like
Yeah, the-
4, 2, 1.
Right.
But I don't think it's
think
gonna be
it'll
that. It's not going to be that great television, unfortunately. But some suspense. But after the fact, explaining what happened. Like in the Olympics, we don't hear from the judges, right? So we'll see who
why,
wins the gold
right,
medal,
yes.
and then we'll hear why
how the
ended up that
numbers
way.
moved to the way Phil was explaining a little
Yeah.
earlier.
And that said, Phil, though, we did have a conversation with the Secretary of State's
Yes.
office even before the primary
Yes.
happened, and they had said then that we're hoping to be done before Juneteenth.
That's right.
So even then, they knew this was going to be a process that could take a long time.
That's right. And again, the 3 times in the last 4 cycles, Congressman Jared Golden, who represents CD2's, decided not to run again, which is why we had that Democratic primary. He went through this, right? He won all 3 times by like 1,000 votes. And when there was just his one race, it took about a week. Not all 16 counties, roughly half the state's population, and it took a week just to do that. So they're doing the second
that much
CD
more.
again, plus 2 statewide races with the 2 gubernatorial primaries. So, I think we cut them a little slack, given, they've kept their word. They, in politics, you always want to under-promise and over-deliver. Maybe in life you want to do that, right? So they didn't over-promise. They haven't yet under-delivered because it's not June 19th yet.
Right.
They're going to, make their
90
deadline in a
seconds.
couple of minutes.
Yeah, we're getting close.
We do have a wall. You might notice us looking to our right. We have a wall of monitors that includes the live view where Krishna Harsa is right now. So
There
that's
was
part
a
of what we keep.
flurry of photographers rushing over with their microphones, and so we were I was just keeping an eye on it, but it looks like they're just setting up for.
This is the image we were just talking about. So what a difference in the two last times we saw Christian live. Most recently, a lot of buzz in the room, a lot of people talking, obviously other reporters talking, but with the moment before, he was almost whispering, talking to us because it was so quiet
Very
as they were
hushed.
clearly finishing the final portions of that last race.
And you've been watching the live stream of this, Phil,
Up to
on
a
your
point,
computer
yeah.
as well to keep track of what's going on over there.
Right.
But
It's like that. Did you ever see that movie, The Truman Show, with Jim Carrey years ago?
Oh, yes.
Where, like, you know, it's just like in his room and people are watching.
Doing his thing, isn't it? Yeah.
They're not doing much of a thing.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
kind of what that was watching the YouTube feed.
A little look into that.
Yeah.
So presumably this is where they're setting up. We can see the microphones on the
Yeah.
right side of that, and they're obviously positioning themselves to be able to relay
So that's
this
Kate.
information.
I think that's Kate McBrien on the right in the black dress. To her left in the blue is Janice Spalding, who's the communications director for the department, who's been inundated by us and other reporters and journalists around the state. What's next? What's happening? Thankfully, they're setting up a mic stand, which, you know, we want, if nothing else, to have good audio so we
Right.
can
Hear
hear
what's happening.
what they're saying. Even if we can't see numbers, we can hear them announcing whatever it is they're going to announce.
Phil, you and obviously we will get to this, and that's why we're watching this as it happens. You covered each of these campaigns very closely, held a number of debates with the candidates. What jumps out to you tonight? We talked about this a little bit last Tuesday on the primary, but
that's right.
kind of reflecting back of where all these candidates are right now.
Well, the two gubernatorial slates couldn't be more different. I mean, on the Democratic side, you had the four finalists, let's call them, all experienced public service, most of their adult life. Dr. Shaw in public health, not only in Maine but in Illinois and in Washington and Atlanta for the U.S. CDC. Hannah Pingree, who's currently in second, former State House Speaker, former aide to Governor Mills for most of the last 7 years. Obviously, the daughter of Congresswoman Shelley Pingree. Troy Jackson was in the Senate for the better part of 20 years, was the state Senate president for the last 6 years of his career. And Shanna Bellows has been in public life, has held a number of positions, obviously Secretary of State for the last 4 or 5 years, was also a state senator. So they have those resumes. They have the Augusta experience. They also embraced ranked choice voting. Jackson, Pingree, and Bellows cross-endorsed each other, kind of following the lead of Graham Plattner, who easily won the Senate primary, who was kind of, people in Hancock County pulled it out of him one night at a monthly meeting where they said, give us some help on the governor's race. And he announced who he had ranked first, second, third, Jackson, Bellows, Pingree, and they loved that. You know?
Which was a first for us. We had not seen kind of a campaigning in that style.
That's right. And so the Democrats kind of kept it civil and encouraged that cross-endorsement, that cross-ranking. Republicans, totally different profile and a totally different strategy. 6 of the 7 ran as outsiders. Only Garrett Mason, former state senator and majority leader, had Augusta experience. And he was proud of that. He says, I know how to do a budget. I know where to pull the levers.
leaned on
The
it.
other 6 guys were like, I'm an outsider. And I say guys because they were all men. Several of them were CEOs, 4 by my count. Bobby Charles, we described earlier, different kind of resume in public service, but in Washington. And it was a badge of honor. I have no Augusta experience. Jonathan Bush, I'm going to shrink Augusta. This was their theme. They all talked about drastically cutting the state budget.
Yes.
$2 billion, $4 billion, lowering the income tax 10%. No, I'm going to eliminate it after 4 years, after 8 years. So it was sort of a bidding war about who could cut more spending, who could fight fraud better, and who could clean up Augusta with a fresh look. Totally different campaigns on both sides, and none of them talked about ranked choice. Very little. Ben Midgley and David Jones, the realtor, had a little pact of cross-endorsement. Didn't get that much attention. David Jones at the very end revealed his whole ballot. He had ranked everyone except Bobby Jones. They didn't get along. Bobby Charles, rather.
Right.
They didn't get along. But mostly the Republicans didn't talk about ranked choice voting because, again, they don't really embrace it. They don't like to vote early. They like to come out on election day
Do it that
and
way,
one and done, for the most part.
Two very different approaches to the last several months.
Yes.
And we heard from the Secretary of State's office, speaking of voting early, that they had a lot of absentee votes this year.
Yeah, I think it was about 90,000. And what else did we learn?
She said 3 times as many
That's
absentee
it.
voters than in 2022.
No, but the ratio, Democrat to Republican,
Oh, yes.
was also like 3 to
Democrats-
1. Was also
Sure.
like 3 to 1. And that's not unusual. Democrats, since the pandemic, and maybe earlier, but since the pandemic especially, have embraced mail-in voting more than Republicans, not just in Maine, but all over the country. And the data that we had right up to Election Day from our Secretary of State, indicated that trend is continuing, at least here in Maine. President Trump doesn't like mail-in voting as the head of the Republican Party and has been talking about ways to curb it. He's even given an executive order to the post office saying don't deliver mail ballots in the fall unless your state cooperates and gives us the voting roll. I mean, that's a whole other legal issue.
Part of it,
but,
yeah.
there has, unfortunately, I think, become a partisan divide because Republicans used to have a great mail-in, program. And in some ways, locally in certain places, they've talked about, well, let's just go back to that because you want to bank your vote before election night. What if we have one of those Maine storms like we had today?
And then there's an issue with that.
It suppresses turnout, so you want to bank your vote early. Democrats do that more aggressively here and everywhere.
You mentioned President Trump. A number of candidates hitching themselves very prominently to President Trump. Surprising to you? Not surprising to you that correlation in the run for governor?
Well, look who might win. I mean, no one more than Bobby Charles did that. He even went down to the White House half a dozen times. He was very active on social media. He would post these videos in front of the old executive office building across the street. I just had a meeting at the White House. I don't think he met the president.
Put himself there.
Yeah, and he kept inching toward that. Garrett Mason was another one who very openly courted the White House and wanted,
early on,
coveted the Trump endorsement that never came. We've seen in other states where Trump has endorsed a Republican, it has seemed to have made a difference in the primary. He didn't endorse here. There's one theory about that. Ben Midgley's campaign is managed by Lauren LePage, the daughter of the former governor, Paul LePage, who's pretty close to the White House. And this is a little speculative, but there might have been communication from Paul LePage to the White House. Hey, don't mess up my daughter's campaign and endorse someone against Midgley. I've heard people talk about that. I'm not confirming that. I have no idea. But the president did not endorse anybody. It might have helped someone on the other, like Mason. But on the other hand, if Bobby Charles was waiting for that, he didn't need it because he's well ahead and he's the most MAGA Trumpy Republican. What he says, his policies, talks a lot about lowering crime, even though crime's not so high in Maine. He talks a lot about immigration, being tough on immigration.
So
sounds like President Trump. His posture and policies align pretty well with President Trump, and maybe that's what the Republican Party wants.
Well, and he seems to be the one staying active on social media, where all of the other candidates seem to have kind of last post was June 9th.
You mean since the primary night?
Right.
Yeah, well, maybe they're, in their minds, think it's a lost cause. Maybe they can do math like we were talking earlier. I mean, he's got almost double the votes of the next two closest competitors.
But even
Ben
the
Midgley
Democratic
and Jonathan
candidates have
Bush.
been fairly quiet there.
Yeah, I know Troy Jackson went fishing for about 4 days.
Yeah, he's done that on
He
election
could still
night.
be fishing, yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do? It's all this
All in the
speculation,
hands.
all this path to victory.
Yep.
We don't know. I mean, it's literally frozen in time on June 9th, and it's just all this work behind the scenes to figure out what's going on.
Elections obviously cost money. We have talked a lot about the money that's been poured into a number of campaigns, both locally and at the federal level. Money aside, is it unusual that we didn't see really much activity since June 9th from campaigns, that everyone kind of just went, all right, we're going to sit and wait, as opposed to, I believe in myself, I think I have a chance, I'm going to stay out there?
No, I'm not.
I'm muting your computer.
Yeah, I was
you're a very
wondering. I'm trying to do that. I thought I muted my phone, but you can't beat the technology. It only beats you. Sorry about the beeps. Obviously, they're audible. No.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing more they can
nothing
do.
else they
There's
can
no
do.
outstanding vote.
Yeah.
We have a strict rule. Any ballots to be counted had to be received by 8 p.m. on Tuesday.
I'll leave it to that.
Anyway,
Okay.
I think we might
I
have
know Christian's
activity.
standing by waiting for us to stop talking. We'll check back in with Christian. It looks like there's more activity behind you setting up there.
Please give me your candidates.
We are currently having a little bit of a technical difficulty issue here with the stream. So all of the candidates and campaigns watching at home, they weren't able to hear things, and I think I caught that they had turned the stream off. likely briefly, to be able to boot it back up. Technical difficulties, as one would know, so those moments and minutes that we were told are stretching on a little bit longer. But to tell you a little bit more about who we're going to be hearing from, Julie Flynn, she's going to be in the blue seersucker suit. She's been working in this industry for 3 decades, and she's the longest running state official for elections in the country, right here in Maine. She's been leading the entire show. She's the one that makes the calls, makes sure everything is T's are crossed and I's are dotted here in Augusta right now. And again, we've had all of those elections proved here, but I kind of want to step outside and kind of give you guys an idea. So we're going to have Julie here at that podium, and then this right there, that laptop that is currently being adjusted over there, that's the stream laptop. And then there's going to be a second laptop that the tabulations are going to be run off of. And what we've been told is that this whiteboard over here is where we're going to see those results more fleshed out for those tabulations of the ranked choice voting. We are going to be delayed likely until we can get that stream back up here and make sure that the campaigns and all the candidates who are watching from far away are still able to keep an eye up here. But for those who aren't going to watch the stream, you can watch us here on News Center Maine. For now, I'm going to toss it back to you guys until we have something happening here and those tech issues get resolved.
Technology, man. It's part of the game these
Get
days.
those campaigns in the room.
And they've been going since 9 a.m. I'm looking at the YouTube feed that Christian's talking about. It's been going for 12 hours. No, that's not right. It would be 15 hours, including a lunch break.
Right.
They kept it on during the lunch
Right
break, so you could see no one was tampering with anything.
And that's been part of their transparency message, is that they know everybody can't dedicate 5 days to sit there, but this has been their kind of literally a window into that room of what's happening. And to your point, who is near things and who's been allocated to be around them.
Maybe it's a good time to revisit some of these races that we're waiting on. 3 major ones, obviously. CD2 race, if we can pull up those numbers from where we were on Tuesday, with Joe Baldacci kind of leading the pack there, but
Kind of our last look of where people stood.
Right. Joe Baldacci had about 31.6%, and then Matt Dunlap behind him with 29%, and Jordan Wood 28.9%. So all kind of close in that CD2 race there.
No real
for
runaway there.
Democrats, which they'll be facing Paul LePage because he was running unopposed.
Former to Governor LePage, now 77 years old. It's the second time he's unretired from Florida to move back. People remember that in 2022 he came back to challenge Governor Mills and lost by 13%, though he carried this CD2, and that's one of the reasons why the Republican Party gravitated to him in this conservative-leaning district. They think he can pick up the Golden seat. He was in the race while Golden was still congressman before Golden said he wasn't going to run. So Joe Baldacci is 61. He's a senator from state senator from Bangor. That's his base. He carried Bangor on election night, as expected. And Matt Dunlap right behind him, about 1,800 votes behind him, the state auditor, former Secretary of State for a dozen years, and also a long time ago a state legislator. In fact, one of the issues between Baldacci and Dunlap in the primary was who was more pro-abortion rights, and Baldacci bringing up 1 vote from 2003 where Matt Dunlap had voted for a 24-hour waiting period for women who go to a clinic before they can have the procedure. That became a point of contention in their race. Jordan Wood's a first-time candidate. He's the youngest person of the 3 finalists. He's 36. He worked in Washington as a chief of staff for a California congresswoman, had some other jobs, and he has hope. He's only 293 votes behind Dunlap. And ideologically, probably the closest to Paige Lau, the 29-year-old social worker from Aroostook County, who just got that 10% of the vote. Her second choice will be the first ones allocated, and there could be some movement in this race, and that's what we'll be looking for. Does Wood leapfrog Dunlap, who's the finalist against presumably Baldacci, if he's still in first place?
Okay, and then next for the governor race in the Democratic side of things, Nirav Shah was the one who was leading the pack there. He had 26.8% of the vote, followed by Hannah Pingree, who had about 23%. Troy Jackson, 21. Shanna Bellows, about 20. So the three of them all kind of close together there behind Nirav Shah.
Yeah, Nirav's kind of an interesting story. Everyone remembers him from the pandemic. He still has that name recognition. Also a first-time candidate. Has only lived in Maine just a bit more than 5 years, which is the minimum requirement to be governor. His residency wasn't challenged, though, when he submitted his petition. But, you know, legally it hasn't been an issue. Politically, though, it might be, especially if he's the nominee. You know, so he's up 7,733 votes over Hannah Pingree. The Pingree name, her mother's Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, but she's accomplished in her own right as a State House Speaker. In fact, she had that job in her 20s, was the youngest woman ever in the United States to be a State House Speaker. Also is a very close aide to Governor Janet Mills, 7 years leading what Mills called the Office of the Future, and had her hand on everything from housing to climate change. Troy Jackson, the former state Senate president, you know, he won Portland, he won Bangor. A lot of union support, probably the closest aligned to Graham Plattner, the Senate candidate, who probably brought out a lot of votes for himself and possibly for Troy. Troy was his number one choice. Shanna Bellows, the Secretary of State, very close behind Troy Jackson, and is hoping that she can pick up the 1,000 or so votes she would need to sort of leapfrog him and then perhaps you know, be in the next round against Hannah Pingree, and all four of them have hopes and see a path, starting with Angus King's second choice votes, to move up and hopefully get to the final round.
Okay, and then the Republican side of things, obviously Bobby Charles was leading that race with 37.9%. Followed up by Ben Midgley, about 20, Jonathan Bush, about 19, and then Garrett Mason had about 11%.
Yeah, so Charles is 22,463 votes ahead of Ben Midgley, who's only 386 votes ahead of Jonathan Bush for second place. And you can see the 8 candidates, Jim Libby on the bottom, the state senator from York County. He's actually the 8th name. We didn't talk about him very much because he actually suspended his campaign. Robert Wessels, going from the bottom to the top, really a career in retail. A guy from South Paris was on the Board of Selectmen there. His biggest executive job was running a Walmart with 400 employees. David Jones is a realtor. He lives in Falmouth. Had higher hopes than the 3% that he got. And then Owen McCarthy, who's an entrepreneur in his 30s, the youngest candidate on the list, made a good name for himself in this campaign. Everyone seems to like Owen McCarthy, and but he only got 4% of the vote. A disappointment for him. Garrett Mason with 11%, the former state senator, the only one, proudly, with Augusta experience. For everyone else on this list, an outsider, and like Bush and Midgley, McCarthy and Jones, CEOs. That was their big calling card. They know how to read numbers. They know what they've signed paychecks, running on that management skill and experience. And Charles having different skills and experience, mostly in Washington, but a really significant lead. He actually said this afternoon, I haven't fact checked it, but we'll give it to him. He said no one has ever been ahead by 80% in a ranked choice race where it's held in the country and around the world and lost. So he's very confident, even though he doesn't like what's about to happen. He would have liked to have been called the winner 9 days ago. Maybe he'll be called the winner within the hour. We'll see.
What do you think? And again, we're keeping an eye on that live video. Our crew's in our room and us here as well for when that starts to happen. We'll bring it to you. But I'm curious what is going on in our political landscape. So we just went through 8 candidates just on the Republican side. Each of these races have several candidates that we're not seeing before the election. More candidates saying, "I don't have the numbers. Support this person." We see these candidates saying, "I'm staying in the race. I'm going to get my 2.7% of the vote." What is that doing to the process that we're seeing people stay in the race so long, so that we have 8 people on the ballot?
Well, hope springs eternal, right? I mean, it's a low barrier to entry in Maine. You only needed 2,000 signatures statewide to get on the ballot, and there's no minimum like you need X number in all 16 counties.
Just need that number.
Yeah, it's other states like New York, where I'm from, have a much more complicated system to get on the ballot, and it's not so hard here in Maine. Some people run because they think they can win. Some people run to make a name for themselves. Some people run because they have a pet issue that they really want to get public attention. They want to participate in debates. They want to to do stories on them. Some people are idealistic, you know. So I can't explain what gets into someone's head. You know, there are many more people who pass up the opportunity, you know, don't have the proverbial fire in the belly
to even
than actually do
this.
that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and it's a lot of scrutiny. You know,
yeah, months of it.
Yeah, and it's exhausting. And even though our viewers have seen tons of ads on TV, the real winning, it comes in the shoe leather. And driving around, I think Ben Midgley said he put 70,000 miles on his pickup truck with his wife Sonia, poor Sonia, driving around all over the state. Remember how big Maine is, you know,
Yeah.
right? And you know, a lot of private meetings, private dinners, party meetings, caucuses. You know, and most of the time we're not in the room. Most of the time we're not invited. There are public events, plenty of them, but few on the Republican side this year. It was, as you were saying about Bobby Charles and the others, a very active social media campaign. I mean, Bobby Charles is particularly active. Sometimes he's posts 40 times a day. You think Donald Trump posts a lot?
Multiple posts a day, yes. Yes. Well, compared to the other candidates who
Yes.
have been
Yes.
silent since the primary. In fact,
Yes.
we were just talking, Ben Midgley put out a note saying, I'd appreciate it if you could start collecting some of my yard signs,
Yeah.
which is surprising
Yeah.
when you could still keep them out for the general election.
If you're the nominee.
Right.
One thing I wanted to say is these results of Charles first, Midgley second, and Bush third, that's what actually happened at the Maine Republican Convention at the end of April. Activists, informed voters, likely voters. So in a way, the results, at least at the top of that Republican ballot, you know, aren't that surprising using that. The polling in Maine is notoriously inconsistent, maybe less frequent than we see in other places, and but that was a good poll, given because it was in person, it was a straw poll. You know, people voted in a paper ballot at this Augusta Civic Center, so that was a good foreshadowing of where we are.
Right. Why do you think our polling's inconsistent? What do you think?
Well, it just is. I mean, look at all the races. You know, I guess the best example, a race we're not really talking about, is the U.S. Senate race. And everyone's favorite example is the 2020 U.S. Senate race, where Sarah Gideon, remember her? Was the Democratic candidate, raised a lot of money, was on TV, was very polished, was the House Speaker, had national Democrats backing her, and all the polls said she was going to beat Susan Collins. Except the election night, where Susan Collins won by 9%, got just over 50. There were two other candidates in the race, and I remember we were all so smart saying, well, this is probably going to ranked choice voting, and you know, the third and fourth place candidate, all wrong. Collins won it running away. So that's the best example of people who don't trust Maine polling. No one got that right. It's kind of like the 2016 election with Trump versus Hillary Clinton. So
polling was very off there.
But at the presidential level, polling is incessant. You know, there's so many of them. They have larger sample sizes. Our sample sizes sometimes are too small. The polls that get criticized, you know, sometimes it's just a couple hundred voters, and they're saying so and so is going to win,
to take
leading
such
the
a small
primary.
sample and make
the larger the
bigger
sample,
announcement.
you tend to be better. Also, the polling's not generally. In the old days, it was a landline.
Right,
You had a
Yeah.
human
Yes,
conversation.
yeah.
Now it's like over texting.
It's a text message that
online.
you report as spam and delete. Or at
Right,
least I
that's
do.
a huge
Or
problem
people,
too.
sometimes when people text or online, they're maybe not as, I don't know, honest or sincere.
True, as opposed to having that
When they're
conversation
being
on the phone.
interviewed, yes.
Right, yeah, there's a
yeah.
very different experience in getting
Yeah.
that result out of the
Yeah.
poll.
Just to recap, we have results at this point, but they are having a technical issue with their stream, and so they want to make sure that's up and running before they actually announce the results. So that's what we're waiting on right now.
Okay, so it's funny you just mentioned the Senate race, which has also been a huge part. Just 9 days ago was a huge
Yeah.
part of our conversation.
Yeah.
Rick Bennett is also a name that's
him.
not a big part of tonight's conversation, but we know it is going forward because we know he will be on the ballot.
Right.
And he's likely watching what unfolds tonight.
Yeah, with a big bowl of popcorn, as someone said on Political Brew last week. So let's remind people who Rick Bennett is. Rick Bennett is a longtime state senator. People will know him as a Republican. He's been a Republican for the better part of 2 decades. At one point, he was the state party chairman. Back when Paul LePage was governor, he was once co-president of the state Senate. Fairly highly regarded, has an interesting record, but he left the party. You know, he says he just wants to be less partisan. He thinks there's too much ideology and hyperpartisanship and dysfunction in our system, particularly in Washington, and he doesn't want to be Maine to be more like Washington. He wants it to be less like Washington. I think we could play a little bit of sound from Rick. I was with him last night. He's been doing like 2 house parties a week. He's been campaigning all year. And last night we caught up with him in Portland, where he was addressing some supporters and some curious people who wanted to check out his message. And here's a little sample, if we have that tape queued up, of what he's been saying on the stump.
And that's why I'm running for governor. Because Maine needs a different kind of leadership. A leadership that focuses on results, on fixing what's wrong, and with a proven experience and track record to get there. And a leadership that actually unites us around our shared values. And a leadership that's grounded in integrity, not ideology.
Right, and that's what Rick Bennett has to offer. He's already put out plans for housing, for health care, for child care, for energy. Doing what everyone's saying they're going to do is address the affordability crisis, lower costs on all of those things. He has various plans. We've covered all of that. Bobby Charles was saying earlier this is unfair because Rick Bennett's getting a 9-day head start. You know what? Rick Bennett's been campaigning all year, just like all of them. A little more quietly, but steadily, increasing his presence. And as I said, putting out plans, going to house parties, and he's ready to go. In fact, I think he's going to have a press conference tomorrow to tell us what he thinks about the results.
Well, Bobby Charles also taking a shot at Rick, saying he's a Democrat because he voted in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, we don't know why. We don't know who.
Despite being a Republican for decades.
Right, so now he's unenrolled, and we've talked about that confusion.
The difference between the terms.
We like to use the term
Yes.
independent, but truly it's called unenrolled. He unenrolled from the Republican Party. I think he doesn't feel comfortable in the Trump Party, and I think, look how many people ran for governor in the Republican Party this year. So this is an easier path, or let's say not easy, but a different path for Rick Bennett to pursue. And I think the way he sees it, if the most conservative Republican and the most liberal Democrat, that maybe his path was a little bit wider. We'll see. The campaign hasn't really started yet. We don't know who the party candidates are, but he's offering something different. And the most important thing we can say is, all this talk about ranked choice voting for the last 9 days, we're not going to have it in November.
Right.
That's going to be a plurality.
So it could be it's the percentage.
It could be someone wins 35%. I can't remember Paula Page's percentage was around 40% when he first got elected in 2010. We won't have a majority governor in the fall. I don't expect. I could be wrong. Someone could just take off in the public eye and win 50%.
But it doesn't require it.
It doesn't require it, and it's less likely given you're going to have 3 strong candidates.
Yeah.
And typically in a situation like that, that independent can either take votes from the Democrat or the Republican if you don't have that ranked choice voting set up. So.
Right, and we should remind people, I don't want to put down the Republicans in this way, but some people say one reason the Republicans don't embrace ranked choice voting as the Democrats do, they prefer plurality voting, is because they have the smallest registration in the state. Not by a lot, but Democrats have right now 34.25% of the voters in Maine. They're the largest by at least 5%. Republican Party is actually not even second, it's third. Unenrolled or independent is second by just a little bit. That's 31 2/3% in the state of Maine. Republicans have only 29.9% of current registered voters in Maine. So the pool of Republican voters is a little bit smaller. And as we said, in this primary, only 126,000 gubernatorial ballots on the Republican side, 215,000 on the Democratic side. Right there's a gap of 90. But overall, the difference is about 45,000 in registration. So Republicans have that disadvantage, and in theory would have that disadvantage in a ranked choice runoff in a general election. But they have their other reasons for not liking it, which we've heard Bobby Charles and others talk about.
And presumably why both parties are so focused on trying to get that unenrolled voter.
Independents decide elections.
A huge number.
Yeah. Because party loyalty is very high. I mean, the polling we've seen, whether it's inconsistent or infrequent, if you don't like polls, but most polls have shown this is generally speaking, like 80% of people registered by party, like, for example, Susan Collins or like Graham Plattner. And I think we'll see the same thing in the governor's race.
I wonder if we can check in with Christian Harsa again, who's in the room, who could maybe update us on what exactly is going on there. Are they working on the technical aspect of things? What's going on, Christian?
the computer. Is the stream working? All right, I'm getting some thumbs up from the campaigns in the room. And I'm peeking around the whiteboard here. It does look like they're continuing to make the progress. What we're waiting on now is figuring out and making sure that the computer that's going to run these tabulations is prepped and ready to go. I'm just guessing on how where the progress is right now, but I have seen some movement back there, so that's looking good. But we are just waiting on those final tabulations going on right now. The mood here is tense. Everyone is eagerly waiting. Me just even saying the word tense got some giggles from the campaigns to everyone, and they're giggling more. So we are all eagerly awaiting the campaigns, probably more than the reporters. But we are going to just keep waiting, and I'll leave it with you guys.
Oh, so the campaigns are now in the room, Christian, because before they were outside of the room.
Ones that are not in the room. I think pretty much everyone is represented here in one way or another, and if they're not here in the room, they're watching on stream almost certainly.
To that point, Christian, if you can still hear us, you've been following this multiple days now. Describe for us a little, if you can, about who's been in the room with you for all these hours, all these days. We know at least some of the campaigns have had a designated representative sitting alongside this process all week.
Yeah, I think you're going to see the most representation from the Democratic camps here throughout this whole entire process. This is day 5. I've been here for 4 of those 5, and you saw some of the Republican candidates send a representative, but pretty much the entire time that this has been going on, at least that I've been here, there's been Democratic representatives, those from Pingree, Shaw, Bellows, Jackson. They've been here throughout the entire process, whereas we've seen Bobby Charles' campaign representative here occasionally. Bush has had someone here pretty routinely, but it is really those Democrats where it's such a tight race with 3 of them within just a few percentages, and Shaw leading the pack, but not by enough to win, obviously, on election night. So they have been the ones biting their nails throughout this entire 5-day process.
It's been a long day for you, Christian. It's also been a long day. The last 2 days have been very long for those workers behind you. What's sort of the sense from them at this point?
Well, earlier on, there was a lot of wondering from us of if today was really going to be the day, and Kate McBrien, the Chief Deputy Secretary of State, was very adamant that we were going to get done today. She has admitted to being a little overly optimistic as we went through the Tuesday, the Wednesday, but she was very adamant, and she's looking at me like I've betrayed her, reporting the facts. But she was very adamant that we were going to get it done today. We did blow by the 11:30-ish 2-hour window. It's now 12:30, but we are going to get them. I guess now it's Friday, but we are going to get them before the workers go home for the holiday, is what I've been told.
Okay.
Officially Friday. Thank you for the reminder on that one, too, that we're at the 12:30 hour.
Can't forget.
That's right. All right, Christian Harsa live for us in the room where those tabulations have been happening, obviously, for the last 5 days, and where it sounds like we continue to get closer to waiting to see those results.
And you know that room is on the other side of Christian, behind the camera. That room is packed.
People
And
all sitting
even
there watching him.
on either
Yes.
side of him, we've gotten glimpses of other reporters, other news organizations in that room just anxiously waiting for this.
Yeah.
I think that's been a great point to bring up, because I think from the viewer's perspective, even on our reporting from Christian every night, we're getting that view to the room where the work is happening. And there have been times we've been on the air and they've wrapped up for the night, or they're on a lunch break, and it's easy to say, there's no one in the room. There's nothing happening. But that's not the case. There has been constantly a lot happening in that room. But we wait. We continue to wait.
Yeah, and throughout the day that this stream has been up since 9 a.m., usually Kate McBrien, but not only her, she comes real close to the screen and narrates what's going on. Now we're going to look at this county's ballots. Now we're going to look at that county's ballots. Now we're looking at this governor's race, that governor's race. So they've done their best to not just be transparent, but to keep people who are watching. And, you know, sometimes I've been like one of 24 people watching. I haven't watched it that much, but not huge rating numbers. I'm not going to break any Nielsen rating records on the Secretary of State's YouTube. But, you know, trying to keep people who are interested informed and narrating where we are, where we were.
And it seems like that's obviously a huge part of this transparency of the process. And it is a confusing process. I mean, we've asked Christian a number of questions while he's been there for the last 4 days. But it's helpful to have her coming up to the screen and kind of explaining, okay, here's where we are.
Yeah, and unfortunately, over the last several years, there's been more mistrust in our elections. We still don't have the answer to something that happened earlier this year. Remember the story of the 250 ballots that showed up in somebody's Amazon box. I think it was from the Belfast clerk or in that area.
Ellsworth, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and then also, don't forget, the envelopes also disappeared or were sent to the wrong place. This is way before voting happened, but that investigation's still open as far as we know. I think the Secretary of State has revealed that they had some leads, some mess up in the courier service, but it hasn't been fully resolved. No one's been, certainly criminally charged. But those types of incidents create mistrust, and certainly the notion that there's, ballots for hundreds of thousands of votes, again, from 487 polling places, moving. Can create concern. So I think that's why they're showing you on the table. You can see the envelopes being opened up. You can see them being locked up at the end of the day. And so they're trying to assure people that there's no shenanigans. But the counting and the recounting, and they're looking at, well, these were the totals that they reported on election night, and we just ran the ballots. The totals match. That's what they call. That's part of what they call reconciliation, and that's part of the process.
What was reported from each community versus what
That
they're
the totals
tabulating
line
there.
up. The totals line up.
And we saw, to your point of showing envelopes being sealed. So I remember some of the video from Christian this week. At one point was an envelope being held up, shown to the room. This is what it's from. This is where it's from. Opened it. I mean, it was all very laid out in front of the people in the room and the people, Phil and his 24 other friends watching on the YouTube stream this week. Hopefully, you can all get together and have a good time when this is done.
I think it was all the people from the campaigns and like
Probably.
five political reporters.
watching very closely as well. All right, so this is, again, our look inside that room. Christian got the thumbs up when we last saw him that the stream should be back up and running, so we are waiting on that and anticipating that at this point.
Still we wait, Phil. Still we wait.
Yeah, well, it's interesting about this is it's an open seat, the governor's race, right? Janet Mills.
Right.
We really haven't talked about tonight, but really a historic figure in the state of Maine. Has been the first woman everything, right? Obviously the first woman governor. Before that, the first woman attorney general.
Right.
Before that, the first woman DA, not just in Maine, but in any county in all of New England, right? She was the DA in Androscoggin and a couple other counties up there. Really a path breaker, and got reelected comfortably. And took the plunge. I think she was lured by Chuck Schumer in Washington and other national Democrats to detour in her last year into the Senate race. That didn't work out so well for her. Obviously, she suspended her campaign. But this is a race to succeed her. And obviously, there are two women running on the Democratic side who have that hope, one who worked very closely with her. But I think that's why we have such a large field overall. As we see in presidential races, when it's been 8 years and then a whole lot of people get involved.
Yeah.
So I think some of these people, maybe on the Democratic side, have maybe nurtured the dream longer in their careers in public service. Some of the Republicans are, less known. Someone from the Bush family, hey, it's in his blood, right? One former state senator, but the rest are really newcomers to politics, certainly elective politics. But there's a lot of them, and as you were saying earlier, there could have been more. We know people who have held office in the Republican Party in Maine who might have been attractive candidates, but they decided to sit it out for whatever reason. It's always a very personal decision.
I'm curious, campaign-wise, so whomever we find out wins these races tonight from ranked choice, what does day one, if you will, 1A, look like tomorrow for campaigns? All right, you won ranked choice, you're on the ticket. Do you hit the ground tomorrow at 8 a.m.? Do you ease into it? What's the strategy that would
I think
happen
the
here?
winners on both sides might just, pop up tonight and make a declaration of victory on camera, so we all see that on the morning news and throughout the day, and they show that they're energetic and ready to go. I think the losers, to a man or a woman, will probably just put out paper statements. Some will be more disappointed than others. And I think the other thing to look for in the next couple days are so-called unity events. Republicans are already planning a unity breakfast in Hallowell on Saturday. We'll see who shows up for that.
Yeah.
And I think the Democrats may have one as early as next week. Same thing, unity.
Okay, that is the message.
term.
Christian Harsa live for us again in Augusta at this polling, at the tabulation place. Christian, hi.
During this campaign.
Hi, Brian and Amanda. This has been a long process, as everyone who's been watching and eagerly awaiting knows. It's been a 5-day tabulating process, and 9 days ago we had the election here. So I want to start to walk us through all of the work that has been done to be able to get us to this point. So yes, we started tabulating here in Augusta 5 days ago, but the process really began on election night with all of those towns putting in those preliminary results. That's what the AP has been reporting. But then after that, you have to start putting all of those documents and pieces together. There are 487 towns and cities in Maine, and all but 150 of those have ballot scanners at their location. So those towns put together hardened flash drives that are encrypted specifically for the machines here in Augusta. Now, those towns, they would send those padded envelopes, as Amanda and Brian were talking about. They would send those off, have them ready, and there would be a chain of command of those envelopes going to law enforcement. Now, for those 150 smaller towns that don't have those scanners, they would put all of the ballots into a hardened lock box. It's a metal, kind of looks like a gun ammo box for those who might be familiar. My grandfather used to have one of those at home, but these blue boxes, metal, and they would lock them with the key that the Secretary of State's office would have here, and then they would also put a little tag on them that'd be time-stamped to show that it hasn't been opened. And so they have this small pair of bolt cutters, about the size of a normal pair of scissors, that they would cut open, get rid of that tag, that timestamp tag, and then open up the box. And inside those boxes would be all of the ballots. So those boxes of ballots, as well as those padded envelopes, would have, by under Maine law, have to be transported by law enforcement. So the Secretary of State's office has a team throughout the whole entire state. It's a very large state, as we all know, to bring those 487 towns and cities voting and ballot records to Augusta. Now, because of this second congressional Democratic primary, they preemptively told all of the towns, regardless of whether or not they had a scanner or not, to also send their paper ballots. So a larger community such as Bangor likely does have those scanners, but they also sent their paper ballots, just in case there was any issues, which we have had some, where a number didn't quite add up. They were able to scan them here without sending a police officer to go pick something up all the way up in Presque Isle before. Now, once they brought all of those ballots here, whether or not they're scanned or they're paper, that's when they start putting them together. So opening up those envelopes, showing everyone on the stream and in this room that the envelope is empty. They slowly went through, uploading those into the digital system here. As for the paper ballots, they would open up those boxes, going county by county. If I recall correctly, they started with a Roostic, and that's when they would run those through the tabulator machines. We might even, we can't really see them from this angle, but it would, well, my camera woman is saying Scout. Let's shout out Scout, by the way. We have that off in the distance over there, and so these are more technical machines that are more accurate and able to very quickly scan through, as in compared to the ones that you would see at your local town or city office. And so when they would be scanning those here, they'd be scanning all of them very, very quickly to be able to get those scans, so that way they could put those into the computer system. That was the type of work that was happening on Friday. When we got into Monday, I personally wasn't here. My colleague Alex Haskell was here, but I imagine that was continuing on into that day and making sure that's scanned and uploaded into the system. And then we get into this process that's called reconciliation. What is reconciliation? Well, that's making sure that what was done at the ballot box on last Tuesday on election night matches what they have here in Augusta. And that's where a lot of these issues, these hiccups started to happen. That's where you'd find that maybe a clerk at an office hadn't quite done their math correctly, and so they have to figure out what is that math. That's also where we started to see those issues with some of those flash drives. And for instance, in Biddeford, they sent the wrong flash drive. They sent a local flash drive, And these local versus state flash drives are actually encrypted differently. So the state computers here can't even read that local flash drive. So they had to send a police officer to go get that state flash drive and bring it back here to the state office to be able to finish up Biddeford's ballots there. There was also an instance in Bath where they didn't send it at all, so they had to go down there and get it. And those were some of the issues. Bodenham, for instance, the flash drive wasn't even able to be read, so they had to go get those paper ballots and scan them here again in Augusta. It's all about making sure that what was done on election night, what the voters of Maine did, is accurately reflected on this computer that is going to run this ranked choice tabulation. That's really what this process has really been about this entire time, is making sure what the voters did is reflected in what this ranked choice voting tabulation is ultimately going to be. And then after the reconciliation stage, that's making sure town by town, all 487 are accurately represented here. And then after that, they get into what was later told to me was the pre-proofing stage. And so they have these big binders with all of the results in it. It's including scans of what the town sent. It's including tabulations of printouts, for instance, but those binders are big and meaty, and that can take a lot of time of flipping through them to be able to then get to the proofing stage to make sure that what is in the computer matches what was actually done, because there might have been an issue with something in the computer. And they did find the Secretary of State's office, that there was some discrepancies about what was in the computer in that proofing process. But that pre-proofing process was all about efficiency, consolidating the numbers of these 5 ranked choice voting elections into one page per town. I was looking at Auburn earlier. I would say there was probably 20 pages that the elections officials here would have had to flip through to validate, to make sure that the numbers were accurate, but they consolidated all that down into one piece of paper with all the wards, the precincts of those towns, and it went 1 through 5 for the Democrats, 1 through 8. Don't forget, we have State Senator Jim Libby on there, and then also for any relevant CD2 races, any relevant local elections for that House 58 and Senate 4. So that was that pre-proofing stage. And then the proofing stage was this last part that we were waiting for on this whiteboard, was going through all 5 and making sure that what was in the computer matches what has been verified by the state election officials here in that reconciliation process. That's what we were working on today. I believe it was about at 10 o'clock that they started working on that. But we also do know how they're going to go through these elections with the tabulator machine and the laptop. So they're going to start by announcing the gubernatorial Republican primary, the winner, and then how those ranked choice tabulations went down. Then we're going to move on to the Democrat, then the CD2, and then we're going to go Senate District 4 first, and then we're going to go to that House district. That's how it's going to be presented. Now, I am not aware of any of the Republican candidates planning to be in the room or in Augusta. We did hear from Bobby Charles earlier today, who held a press conference at about, it was originally supposed to be 5:30, then it was moved back earlier to 4:30, and at that point he was talking mostly about ranked choice voting, and what he has is a decent disdain for it. He says that if he is elected governor, he is going to work to try to get rid of ranked choice voting here in Maine. It was asked, how are you going to do that? It's been something that's been passed by the Maine voters, and he said that he's going to work with the legislature because he feels that this process, which has taken 9 days since Election Day and 5 days of working here at the Augusta building, here at the Department of Public Safety building in Augusta, he says that's going to be something that Democrats and Republicans are not going to like, and that they would all join together to be able to get rid of. Now, will that happen? Will Bobby Charles even be the nominee for the Republicans? We'll find that out whenever we get to those results. They're still plugging away at that behind this board behind me. But as for the Democrats, we've been told that Bellows, Jackson, and Shaw are prepared to be here if they win here in Augusta. Hannah Pingree is still an unknown for us here, but we are once again still waiting on these tabulations to be ready for that computer to be able to run the tabulations here in Augusta. It has been very much a waiting game, been a waiting game for everyone, waiting for 9 days and 5 days, and then we got here about 10 o'clock today, and so it is now 12:47 according to my phone, and that means we have been waiting, and we will keep waiting. Brian and Amanda.
Christian, can you go over all that again?
Just repeat it. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you asked. I was waiting for round two.
All right, Christian, we'll check back in a minute. Again, we're just waiting for the Secretary of State's office to finally come forward and release those results to us
The
here.
data on that.
Yes.
I know we're going to give Christian a second to breathe for a minute. We were talking about the security of this process and the transparency of this process. Phil, we were chatting a moment ago of the significance of where this is happening.
Yeah, he's not in the Secretary of State's
Right.
office, which some people know is a sort of old building on the corner near the State House. I think we're allowed to say where they are, right?
Yeah,
the-
it's because it's open to the
it's open to
public.
the
Yeah.
public.
So it's the Maine Public Safety Building. I mean, that's like cop headquarters in Maine.
Right.
So that building in itself, but there are also police officers watching everything. There's cameras everywhere. And as we said earlier, as Christian was describing, all the materials, ballots, and thumb drives from those, some 480 districts, by law, state police officers are the ones who had to drive them, deliver them to Augusta. There's no courier service, there's no DHL,
Right.
FedEx, UPS, all good companies, but they're not allowed to touch it. You and I aren't allowed to collect it.
Yeah, an officer, right?
Right.
Right.
Very
And I remember
secure.
the Secretary of State's office had said early on in this process that a lot of officers volunteer to do that run, to be part of this, because they know it has to be
Right.
one of them anyway.
Because it's such an important
right,
thing.
It's a key role to play of carrying that documentation to that location, to a secure location.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to see, we filling some time here. At election night, we talked to all the leading campaigns. We carried a lot of speeches live, but I think we have a little excerpt that we'd like to play just to refresh everyone who these guys are and what they sound like. Here's some of what the top three Republicans, Bobby Charles, Ben Midgley, and Jonathan Bush, said to us on election night, if we can roll that.
As ranked choice is counted, we are confident we are going to win this primary. We are ready, and Maine is ready. Maine Republicans should be proud of the bench we have and of the campaigns that were run. Now is the time to unite because, in a phrase, we have work to do.
Built a big company, created 15,000 jobs, so know how to build an economic future for people in the state. We've looked deeply at every challenge we have in the state. Everything is fixable. We've just had a lot of bad decisions that have put people in a bad spot, and it's time we turn it around.
I do think that the vast majority of Maine Republicans want an outsider, and I think they want a CEO. And there's more than one of those, but my sense is that you'll see a lot of those CEO outsiders at the top of the ballot.
Well, that turned out to be true. Himself, Midgley, Bobby Charles has run his own company and lobbying and consulting firm in Washington, but has also held a number of jobs in Washington, Assistant Secretary of State, kind of an executive job, but none of them have Augusta experience, which was the real calling card on the party that's out of power, wanted to come in and shake up things. I want to talk a little bit more about Ben Midgley. We were talking earlier about the yard signs, and I just want to correct because you observed that some of the signs are being removed, and I suggested, well, maybe he's in his mind throw it in the towel. That's actually not right. There is a state law that limits the number of days you can have signs out all year.
I'm surprised by that during a ranked choice tabulation,
Right.
though.
Well, this is
you would think that
continuing.
would.
The deadline would push off.
Right, because I do believe it's something like 3 days that you have to remove your.
What I've been told is it's 12 weeks per calendar year. So you have to remove, I think we're going to see a lot of the signs get removed and then come back up in the fall, at least the people who are still in it. So, wrong to suggest that Midgley was giving up by taking down his signs. He's complying with the law. And I'm also told that, I was suggesting earlier, I was just saying was something some people were saying, that maybe Paula Page had talked to the White House, don't endorse someone because Ben Midgley's running and my daughter's running that campaign. Lauren LePage has been in politics a long time and she knows what she's doing and she can fight her own battles. I was just talking about the context that a lot of the Republican candidates had hoped that President Trump would endorse them. Bobby Charles particularly. I think it's fair to say Garrett Mason was also angling for that. And President Trump stayed silent in this race. J.D. Vance came, as you may remember, to Bangor last month and emphatically endorsed Paul LePage for CD2. Now, he had no competition. He's the Republican nominee by acclamation. And so we're going to start seeing a lot more of Paul LePage campaigning against whoever wins this Democratic primary. We have Joe Baldacci and Matt Dunlap and Jordan Wood. Jordan Wood's interesting because he actually started as a Senate candidate. This younger person, right? He's from Lewiston.
That's right. That
He's from
feels like so
Feels
long
like
ago.
a lot, yes.
Before
That was part
Graham
of the
Plattner,
cycle.
before Janet Mills was
Right.
Jordan Wood, 36 years old. He lived actually in Bristol at the time, not in the 2nd District. And now he does live in Lewiston with his husband in the 2nd District. And, he had to move to make the race, at least politically. Legally, you don't have to live in your congressional district, but politically, we all know you have to.
Sure.
Right? Like a city council district and anything else. So, he had to maneuver to sell himself, if you will.
And that came
to-
around after Jared Golden had announced that he was not going to be going after the seat anymore, right?
That's right. He waited
that's
when
what-
Golden dropped out. He
made that shift.
He wasn't. It seems getting that much traction in the Senate race, where Graham Plattner, also an unknown person before, shot out
Came
like
right
a
out.
rocket with the Bernie Sanders endorsement and a lot of national press just at his announcement, which is kind of interesting and different. So I think Jordan felt a little boxed out there, and he switched, moved to the district, and now he's in 3rd place by just a little bit. We'll see how he does when they run the ranked choice.
29% of the vote on Tuesday for a relatively unknown name as well.
We have very respectable showing. Some people say he overperformed. He wouldn't say that. He was very confident. He worked his butt off. He had a lot of town halls, started earlier than everyone, and has a very progressive message. So we'll see. He's for Medicare for all. So is Matt Dunlap. Joe Baldacci has a more nuanced position. He's for phasing it in, maybe lowering the age to 55, and then more incremental approach. But that was one of the differences in the Democratic primary.
Go ahead.
I'm curious. We've talked about the names quite a bit, obviously tonight, but a lot of familiar names of either family members, related to people, political names. Did that carry as much weight for you as you thought it might going into the primary?
Well, I asked all of them. Let's start with Angus King III. When I sat down for my profile interview with him, my first question was, if your name was Angus Smith, would we be talking? And I also said, doesn't it take some audacity, your first run for office, to go for the state's top job? Why don't you run for the legislature? But I guess when you're the son of a governor, the son of a U.S. senator, maybe your sights are a little higher. He handled himself, I think, very respectively, very well. He only got, 70% of the vote? Or am I overstating it? It's 17,000 votes.
17,000,
Excuse me.
8.3%.
Right.
Yep.
And I don't think it's the last of Angus King III, but I think there was a lot of confusion early on. Some of the early polls showed him winning. We were talking about polls earlier and some of the pitfalls in polls, and one of them is most of the pollsters didn't explain. Do you like Angus King III? By the way, that's not your U.S. Senator. They explicitly didn't do that. And I actually had an issue with that. But I think his poll numbers were inflated at the beginning because people thought maybe Senator King was running for governor again. And, we see where Angus ended up. Shelley Pingree's daughter, Hannah Pingree, probably more so than Jonathan Bush and Angus King III, making a name for herself in her own right before this race, right? Has been
We've
State
seen a
House
lot of her for a
Speaker.
while. Yeah.
She's been a top aide to Governor Mills, and as she says, her hardest job was being on her school board. Right. I think she ran it on the island of North Haven, not a very large school district. Hannah Pingree tells the story. She was one of 5 girls in her senior class in high school, and that's it, no boys. The junior class had 5 boys, no girls. Huh? So
swapped.
I don't know what the
Right.
prom was
Yeah.
like back then. I guess they're all
Tricky one.
Yeah, who knows? Tricky, but 25 years of experience in public service, and her whole motto is, I'm someone who's gotten things done, and we'll see how things work out for her. Jonathan Bush, first run for office, really hasn't lived in Maine like Dr. Shaw hasn't spent his life living in Maine. Now, he's summered in Maine, coincidentally, on the island of North Haven. He's not one of the Kennebunk Bushes. President George W. Bush is his cousin. President H.W. Bush was his uncle. And Jeb Bush, people remember the governor of Florida, is also his cousin. We didn't see them publicly, but privately they did a fundraiser or two and helped Jonathan Bush. But he seemed to have the gift of gab and the gift of retail politics. He was a people person.
Talked to a lot of
very
other CEOs.
personable.
Yeah.
Very charismatic in a lot of these conversations.
Yeah. And he seemed to enjoy it. He seemed to enjoy campaigning. He seemed to enjoy debating. So there's another dynasty for you.
When
but-
he stood out
Yeah.
in your debate, I remember
Yeah.
he was on the end, I believe.
Yeah.
And he was perhaps one of the most animated on the
Yeah.
stage. Every time he spoke, it was an explosive,
Yeah.
engaging interaction.
Yeah. Oh, every interview, every press
Yeah.
conference. I mean, that's how he is. Very energetic and effusive, as you say. And I think he had a pretty good result. Not the result he wanted so far. I mean, there's still a chance that he could move up, catch Bobby Charles, pass Ben Mitchley. We'll see.
Which is what we are waiting on tonight as we
Waiting to
approach
see.
1 a.m.
We talked about this on primary night, though, where you talk about some of those names and obviously the famous parents. We didn't see a lot of the parents getting involved in any of these campaigns. Do you think if Hannah Pingree wins this round, will Shelley become more involved in campaigning for her?
I don't think she needs to, because if Hannah's the nominee, they're both going to be on the ballot.
True.
And
Right.
Shelley Pingree, Congresswoman Pingree, would be running for her 10th term.
in CD1.
She's won re-election by higher margins than anyone else recently in Maine. Ron Russell, who opposed her before in 2024 and lost, has been nominated again for that contest in the fall. So I guess Pingree would be the favorite. Incumbents always are. And she represents Southern Maine, which is obviously more liberal than Northern Maine. It's really the Democratic district. So she'll be favored. I just think Shelley's voters, I'm sure, would enjoy voting for Hannah Pingree.
That may be
Right?
an easy transfer in that.
Right. So I have seen Congresswoman Pingree at a couple Hannah events. And in fact, when Shelley Pingree had a couple town halls in 2025, guess who introduced her? Hannah Pingree.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Laying the little foundation.
yeah, I
there.
mean, Hannah has said very clearly, she's doing her thing, I'm doing my thing. I'm
Right.
proud of my mom, but I'm proud
Said
of my
that
own
very
record.
early on, yeah.
And she's also said that not a lot of dudes have dynasties, but not so many gals. And I think those are her words, but she's right. She's right.
She has a good point.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ron Russell.
Yeah.
Worth mentioning that
Sure.
he did not have to go to ranked choice. He won with
50
just over
something,
50.
like 54, 46 over a young candidate,
Josh
Joshua
Petrowitz actually
Petrowitz, yeah.
made quite a run, quite a showing,
For his
more
first-
than what people had
First
expected.
bout.
Well, I think energy was part of it. Not to sound ageist, but there's a 45-year difference in their ages. Petrowitz is a little greener. He ran for Lewiston mayor back in 2023, and he's been bouncing around politics, but he's a young man, 26. I think he's going places. Ron Russell, though, military veteran, career, Army, was involved with the infamous or famous, depending on your point of view, Battle of Mogadishu, back when President Clinton sent troops to Somalia, the Black Hawk Down incident. He talked dramatically about that at the Republican State Convention. He's retired now, at 71. So it was an interesting debate that we had. I mean, both very thoughtful.
Very
I would say-
civil with each other.
well, yeah. Russell, I think, comes across as more experienced, as he says, more life experience. And you can't argue with that.
Right. He does. He has
But I think
decades
being a
more.
veteran always helps in any race, and certainly in Maine, where we're 10% of our state is veterans.
Okay, we continue to watch this unfold here.
We
it
think
was-
it's unfolding at this point.
Well, at this point, it was, 45 minutes ago that we thought we were going to get the results.
Yeah.
And then they had a technical issue with their stream.
I thought the stream
and-
was up. I don't know what they're waiting for.
Yeah, so now I
lost my YouTube feed
yeah, I
here.
want to look
so-
over at the monitor too.
I keep looking
the
over. I
same.
see Scout checking the microphone. She's probably checking to see if the batteries are still going because it's been so long.
Yeah.
Everybody waiting.
Do we want to check back in with Christian to see what the holdup is, if there is any news at this point? He's there. He's ready.
Hey, he's always ready.
Hello.
What's the holdup,
Always
Christian?
ready, always listening. I wish I could tell you, Phil. I really don't know. I think we're at the point where this is only up to, I think, one woman, the Julie Flynn of working on this for 3 decades. I don't have any updates on what is going on, but I can tell you more about how much this cost back in 2018. I did look that up, Phil. They have it itemized on the website, the Secretary of State's FAQ page. So yes, some of those costs are courier costs. In total, it was $441,000. I was a little overestimating it with $445. It's $441 and $804, according to the Secretary of State's office back in 2018. So how much did ranked choice voting cost back then? So there was a startup cost, and that includes purchase hardware for local area network. And so that's about $30,000 right there. And then on top of that, it's the software. So that's partially what they've been plugging into to be able to run this tabulation. And that, for the lease alone, costs $22,400. And then really the courier service, which is what Phil was asking about, that cost for the primary alone, just the primary alone, that ballot retrieval was nearly $31,000. And then in the general election as well, they have that keynoted right here. Cost just about the same, actually the same amount, $30,875. But the biggest cost is really the printing and delivering of separate referendum ballots that was in that primary election. Of that $441,000 marker, that made up $268,000. So we're seeing a very large chunk of that total sum just coming from printing and delivering the separate referendum ballots. Now, one could assume that the delivery of that included the DHL, the UPS, the Postal Service, or whatever, including the printing of the physical paper ballots. Just taking a look over my shoulder here to see if we've made any progress. I don't see any progress quite just yet. But overall, one would expect that with a little bit more, it might not actually cost that $441,000 because that is including both the primary and the general election. Now, this is something that's going to be calculated once this process is all wrapped up. And I could assume that some of this overtime that the state employees may be getting is going to get factored into that. But I would offer the point to make that many of these state employees would already be working. So you have to take that into account into what this true cost would be. But again, these are numbers from 2018, and we're talking about an election that is a little bit grander in scale in the terms of the ranked choice voting elections that we have to that they have to tabulate here. And you are accounting for that it has been almost a decade, 8 years, since those elections were taking place, but that is including the primary and the general election, whereas this is just the primary election, Brian and Amanda and Phil.
So Phil got your question answered there.
Going back.
I mean, there are costs, as he
Yes.
was outlining, and you know, I mean, that's a fair complaint. This adds costs to our elections. It's a choice. You know, to do it this way. Again, we talked about the merits, the value of having a 50% or 51% winner, true majority rule, a broader base of support, whether it's for the nominee or the general election. I mean, I think those are, you know, good values, but on the other side, what's wrong with the plurality? That's the way we've always done it for 200 years, 250, I guess, right?
Yeah.
July 4th. As Bobby Charles said
right,
today,
right,
the
at
man
4:30
who's
today,
already
yeah.
won a plurality and may win the ranked choice, we don't know. I'm sure he'll be howling mad if he loses ranked choice.
Right.
But I don't think they think that's going to happen. I think they're fairly confident that when they run the rounds, that he'll prevail.
And I believe Bobby Charles today, when he was speaking at 4:30 about his frustration with ranked choice, had said that if he is elected, he plans to make it a mission to do away with it. That's a goal of his.
Yeah, I mean, this has
He's
been
that unhappy with this process.
Yeah. Well, you know, change the law, have another referendum. I mean, this has been a long road to get to this point. I am surprised other states haven't really embraced it. There are not that many jurisdictions. Probably the largest notable one is New York City, where Mayor Mamdani, who's now sort of nationally famous, a lot of his media people are working for Graham Plattner. Similar progressive, newcomer, youthful posture in both of those races. New York City had a ranked choice mayoral election. I don't know what New York does statewide anymore, but it really hasn't taken off across the country as some people would like it to.
We do know that Maine, from our reporting, was the first state to actually adopt ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
That was back in 2018.
Yeah. Right, and I don't know of any...
Alaska followed suit in 2022.
That's right, Alaska.
Washington, D.C. voters approved RCV in 2024.
Right, so city.
And I think when we say 2018 and we think, okay, that was a while ago, but you think about how infrequent our elections are, and then the elections that we would use ranked choice voting for. So we as a state have not actually had that many opportunities to use it or experience to use it. And I think that was part of the explanation going into primary day last week of educating people to what it means and the options you have to use your ballot.
Right, because there are still so many questions.
Because there's still so many questions, because it's not a regular thing for voters yet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even, just as an example of what could happen, here in Portland, we've had ranked choice voting for several elections. And if you remember, a few years ago, we had an election for a charter commission that was going to rewrite the charter that governs Portland and how we elect our mayor and maybe increasing the mayor's power compared to the city council. And the top two vote getters in the first round ended up not winning. There was Ben Grant, who's now on the city council, and Steve DeMillo, who owns DeMillo's Restaurant, popular restaurant in the Old Port. DeMillo was first, Ben Grant was second in the first round, and then when they ran the ranked choice, they got leapfrogged. If memory serves, there was sort of a slate of Democratic Socialists who ran as a slate and told people to cross-endorse and cross-rank, and that's what happened. And that's who's on the charter commission. So it can happen.
This will be so interesting to see.
And so, yes, you were talking earlier about Hannah Pingree, Shenna Bellows, and Troy Jackson cross-endorsing, saying, if I'm not your first, rank me second. Right. Let's stick together. It seemed like a plot it seemed like a plot to box out Nirav Shah,
who ended up at the top on day one,
and was leading, as he said, in like 10 of the polls. Again, the polls, don't like the polls, trust them, don't trust them, but. Nirav Shah was at the top at a lot of them, and here he is at the top of the first round waiting.
And some of the feedback we got on primary night from some of the people who voted for him, it was a lot of it had to do with how he handled the pandemic. They were like, well, I feel confident in the way he got us through the pandemic, so I feel confident about him being governor.
I think more Democrats feel that way than Republicans, right? The whole anti-vax movement.
Yeah.
But, Dr. Shah was a good communicator. Half of politics, in my book, is communication. That was sort of Joe Biden's downfall. A man who was once a great orator, or seen as that, became a bad communicator in his last years as president. His voice and obviously his memory and that horrible debate performance. Yes. And there goes a 50-year career. There goes a re-election campaign. So Dr. Shah's a good speaker. He's funny. I certainly appreciate his rock and roll references all the time. He's quoting lyrics, whether it's Prince or Coldplay or somebody. And he seems to sincerely enjoy mixing it up, with the people. He's had more plans than anyone. But yes, he was on TV day after day for the better part of a year or two. And so even though he was a late comer to the race and has never run before and hasn't been in Maine forever, he started with great name recognition. And he ran a successful campaign. Whether he comes out on top or not, it's been a successful campaign by any standard.
We want to check in once again with Christian Harster. I believe he is standing by, perhaps. There's a little movement. That seems to be the question we keep asking tonight, Christian.
So hi, Brian and Amanda. You've been seeing this angle of this windowless room in the middle of the building for 5 days now, but I want to be able to give you guys a look at what I've been seeing. So we're going to start by panning off to this side and showing you all the people that have been here, the journalism people that have been here, the campaign people that have been here. This is a very packed room. This is the most packed it's been this entire time. We have people all around here from many different disciplines, whether it is reporting the news, whether it is working on a campaign, whether it is working on making sure that this election runs the way it's going to run. Now, most of the people that are here at this point are local Maine news, but we have seen some more national outlets here. The New York Times, I've been told, has been calling pretty much every hour on the hour, trying to find out what's going on with this election. And we also had C-SPAN here earlier today. They have since left, but that really shows the national attention that an election like this one is getting. Now, I do have one piece of new updated information about where we are in the progress of this. We have learned that both the Democratic gubernatorial primary and the Republican gubernatorial primary have been validated, and they're working on validating the second congressional district race in that spreadsheet, so that way when they hit the button and the tabulation runs, it's ready to go. We have really talked about all these steps of making sure that the numbers are right. We talked about reconciliation. We've talked about the pre-proofing. We talked about the proofing. Now we have validating. So once that tabulation runs, those numbers, the Secretary of State's hopes, are the most accurate numbers that we can get here. Now, Phil, you've been following these races for a long time. Why are these races getting so much national attention?
Well, I'm not sure that the governor's race is, Christian, but the Senate race certainly has been all year long. I mean, Janet Mills started it, right, last February of 2025,
Right.
back when Democrats were in the dumps 1 month into Trump 2.0, and he was sort of, better prepared this time and was already steamrolling his agenda. And Janet Mills was at that governor's meeting at the White House,
In
and
Washington.
President Trump was attacking her or the state of Maine or anyone else who didn't want to, I think I'm remembering this correctly, ban girls from transgender girls from
transgender,
participating in girls' sports. And we have the human rights law that allows that. And they had that exchange where
I'll see you in court.
I'll see you in
Yeah.
court, right? And we've seen the T-shirts
Yeah.
Yes.
all year long. And I think that put Janet Mills on the national radar. And then she was recruited, and then we were saying Jordan Wood got in the race, and then Graham Plattner, like a rocket, on August 19th, got Bernie Sanders' endorsement, had the Mandami people. From the mayor of New York, media people. He had John Fetterman, the sort of iconoclastic senator from Pennsylvania, different kind of guy, working for him. And I think they were whispering in all the national reporters' ears, here's the next Mandami, here's the next Fetterman. And a lot of the national press looked into it and wrote pretty flattering profiles of Plattner, like I've never seen before, for a candidate who's not even won his primary. But he got all this great press, raised a ton of money. His first speech was 6,000 people down here at the Civic Center, ostensibly a Bernie Sanders rally, right? The Fighting Oligarchy Tour. Troy Jackson also spoke there.
Yeah.
It was Graham Plattner's 41st birthday, and what a party it was. I mean, he brought the house down, and he is a good speaker, a powerful speaker. A lot of people are buying into his message, and thus his popularity with on the Democratic side. So I think,
Yeah,
Christian,
and
to
Phil,
answer your question,
may I
the
jump in
national
here?
interest is really there, and not as much with our governor's race. Although I've always said, I think what the national reporters might have been missing was the synergy between the two races. If you think about how you vote, you look at the whole ballot. Well, I'm a Plattner person, so I'm a Bellows person, or a Jackson person, or I'm a Mills person, so therefore I'm a Shaw, I'm a Pinckney person, for example. That ultimately didn't happen because Janet Mills dropped out 40 days before the primary. But we all know that the governor's race has been getting locally as much, if not more, attention. And in some ways is more important, more direct impact, right? The governor.
In Maine.
Yeah, on
Locally.
life,
Locally,
right?
yes.
I mean, like governors and mayors is where the rubber hits the road, as they
Sure.
say. Not to say the Senate's not important; it's hugely important, but it's a different kind of important. And so I think C-SPAN's here and other national reporters are here because of the environment that the Plattner campaign has created, but also Maine's a fun place to come on your expense account and do a story in the summer.
It's true, Phil, and I would probably add to say that if we had seen the Plattner-Mills, that primary have to go into ranked choice voting if Plattner hadn't gotten that very sizable amount of the votes. This room, we might not even be able to be in this room because of the national attention. I mean, on election night, I was watching and you see Fox News is there. All of these outlets in the days after, it just seemed like every outlet was at that event that Plattner had on election night. And I think if we had seen Plattner and Mills kind of both having more, Mills having more of the share and Plattner having less, this room would probably be full of national media. But as you were talking about that there was so much attention on the Senate race, that was something that the synergy, as you were talking about, Phil, and we've discussed this, that's something that the candidates here were really trying to tap into. You had Pingree, Bellows, and Jackson trying to get onto Graham Plattner's coattails and try to get them into victory. And that's probably why we see those three people so closely aligned. And the results will tell us we don't don't know right now, but we very well could see that there was a real close match of who was ranked second and third between those three candidates, and that could make it really interesting when we get into those later rounds. It's pretty certain that Angus King is going to be dropped out at the first round of ranked choice voting, but it's those next rounds and where those votes for Angus King go that's really going to shake up those next few rounds as we see what's going to happen with that Democratic primary for governor.
Yeah, and we should note that Graham Plattner set a record for votes in a Democratic Senate primary in Maine, 154,000 votes. No one's gotten that many, and I think a lot of people voted, of course, in the gubernatorial primary as well. In fact, it was almost the same total in those primaries. In other words, people didn't just come out for Plattner and leave the gubernatorial ballot blank. I mean, it was almost both of them had about 215,000 votes. The Plattner effect, I think, was definitely there. He got 71.9% of the vote, which is also the record. But again, to bring Sarah Gideon back into the conversation, she didn't do so badly either. She got 71.5%, but Plattner did set that record by a little bit. You know, she got 116,000 votes in 2020, also a three-way race. Betsy Sweet was the runner-up in that race, one of our Political Brew contributors. But Gideon won pretty easily, and Plattner beat her record.
We're getting an update on where they are.
Yes, let's listen.
So the system quite won't run the race exactly until we get that fixed. So we are just fixing a quick little clerical error that is hooking up the system, and then as soon as that's fixed, we'll be able to run it.
What do we think about how long that might be?
I have absolutely no idea.
And they still have to upload for the Senate and the House after that?
Those are all uploaded. We just need to validate those. But those are like fewer spreadsheets. Yeah. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
So for those who didn't quite catch that and don't know everyone who's been the players in that, that's Kate McBride. She's the Chief Deputy Secretary of State. She, after Shanna Bellows had taken a step back from this election, she's been the one that's really been the top dog overseeing this. She's Shanna Bellows' right-hand woman in this office here. But she was telling us that there is a technical snafu error that has to do with formatting and that second congressional Democratic primary, something within the computer system. Now, both the races for the Democratic primary for governor and the Republican primary for governor, McBride told us, are ready to go right now, but it's that CD2 race that is really where we're seeing a hiccup, and they're working on fixing a formatting issue, we've been told. Now, those other two races, the Senate 4 district and the House District 58, those are much smaller regions. Those are one of just a few, of many in the state that are represented in the state legislature. So those, one would think, are going to go a little bit faster. However, we could see hiccups there as well. It's just not quite clear yet, but Channel 8 was asking what is the timeline here, and we just don't know, and we're going to keep waiting and eagerly waiting to see what these results are going to be.
We're now early into Friday morning here.
Wow.
And yeah,
1:20.
It's interesting because they've had two late nights, the last two nights, Christian. Phil, I'm curious on your take on this. Do you think they're feeling the pressure to get this done? Because they could have waited and they could have finished this out Monday.
Yeah.
But do you think they're feeling the pressure from?
You know, they said,
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Pressure
Christian.
I definitely, we are under pressure. Immediately, the Queen song starts playing in my head as I hear that.
Me too.
But yes, I think
Same.
the pressure is on here because it would not just add on one day to go into the Friday. I was told that realistically, that's just not something they wanted to do. The people here have been working very hard, long days, getting longer as the week has gone on. It is now well into Friday, 1:21, as my phone says. And these have been long days, and Kate McBride has told us that people deserve a long weekend. But that weekend is slowly eroding away, admittedly. But yes, I do think the pressure is on, and there's not that desire to extend it. 3 more waiting days. That'll bring us to 12, 13 days by the time we would get to Monday. And doing it on Friday, which is a state holiday, would both cost overtime, but also holiday pay, racking up those numbers of how much does ranked choice voting cost. Phil, that would have definitely cranked up the number a little bit there.
Yeah.
Well, I can imagine we're getting into that holiday pay now because it is Friday.
Well, they're already into overtime, too.
I haven't asked Kate about that. Yes, overtime definitely. I haven't asked to see quite what the holiday pay formula is. Is it a certain amount of hours in it? If you didn't go to bed, does it really count? I'm not quite certain of what those logistics are, but I'm sure the financial office is going to be trying to figure this out and have to wrap their head around it. Probably on Monday, not Friday, though.
Yeah, that's.
Spoken
I'd be
like a
fighting
future
for that.
manager. If you didn't go to bed, does it count as another work day? All right, Christian Harsuk.
I don't want to be a
continue with our
manager. I'm
updates.
fine being out here in the field.
And you're doing a great job out there, Christian.
Thank you, Christian.
Well, speaking of money,
Thank you.
Speaking of money, Phil.
All right,
we
let's chat
were
about that.
just thinking about not what this is costing, but what the governor's race cost. And, there's not a huge discrepancy, but the number one spender, this wasn't the final numbers. This was one of the periodic reports. I think this was as of the end of April. So without the maybe final months of the campaign where ads were really going crazy. But Jonathan Bush raised the most money and spent the most money, $2.5 million as of the end of April in the governor's race of either party. And on the Democratic side, I believe it's Angus King III, spent about $1.7 million. Both of those candidates contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own money as well. But it was around $1 million. Most of the candidates were in that range. I think Hannah Pingy was the number 2 on the Democratic side in terms of money raised and spent, followed by Bellows. Troy Jackson was further behind. Bobby Charles raised over $1 million. Several of the candidates did. Ben Midgley certainly did.
So that's kind of the mark. The million is kind of.
I mean, it's Maine, right?
Right.
You hear of these races in California where I think Tom Steyer, he's a billionaire, so it doesn't matter. But I mean, he spent, I think it was over $100 million, and that happens in California. People,
Very
they have 50 million people, we have 1 million people, so maybe it's proportionate. Maybe per vote.
Right. Maybe that shakes out. You're right.
Now, when we talk about our Senate race, we've been talking about Graham Plattner. Our Senate race per capita, per vote, is going to be a lot more money, and it's not just. More than $10 million already that Senator Susan Collins and Graham Plattner have already raised well over $10 million each. It's the outside money.
That's a lot of
that
it.
wasn't really a factor in the governor's race. It might be in the fall where the National Republican and Democratic associations will kick in some money. In fact, I know they've already reserved some time, ad time into the fall. But in the Senate race, I mean, it's unbelievable. Tens of millions of dollars already booked. In ad time from independent, so-called independent, ideologically aligned outside groups, super PACs, super political action committees that can raise and spend unlimited sums. There was one governor candidate, Garrett Mason, who had $2 million or more spent on his behalf by one of those groups. Most of the ads for Mason were produced and paid for by that group, funded by billionaires from the Midwest. And Mason got a lot of grief from his competition in the debates. They said, you can't come in and buy a race. And he said, you're just jealous. You should be happy that people want to elevate the Republican Party.
Right?
I mean, that was the debate. Mason, I think,
that.
would have wanted a happier result, and probably those benefactors as well
Of
had
course.
higher hopes.
And I think
His 11%.
Coming off the primary last week, I think we had maybe a 30-hour window where we didn't see all the political ads.
Oh, the car ads
I
were
think it
back?
was
The
less
car
than
ads
30
are out.
hours. Yeah.
Mattress ads were back.
But
And then we got right back to them.
Well, that said, because they didn't have to take part in ranked choice voting, the Plattner campaign back with ads and
Right away.
Right back on the
Never
campaign
stopped.
trail.
Senator
Yeah.
Collins has ads out there right now, so
Multiple ads, some by their
Yes.
own campaigns. I think Plattner has a few more that he's produced himself, but both of them have independent ads backing them, particularly Senator Collins right now. There's one super PAC called Pine Tree Results that's already committed $40 million to the race.
Big money.
when do you think we'll start seeing, some of the ads or some of the campaigning from, like Paul LePage in that race or from Shelley Pingree in that race? When do they start ramping things up as we
Yeah.
get closer to November?
I don't think it'll be until after Labor Day.
Okay.
I'm guessing. No one's told me that, but people are checked out a little
Doing
bit
the
more in the
summer.
summer.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
There's vacation land, and I think there's a little fatigue. Obviously, the candidates are going to keep, pounding the pavement and doing events, but Labor Day is traditionally the real start of a fall campaign, and I think that'll be the case here.
You talk about pounding the pavement. You pounded a lot of pavement in this election cycle as well, because you were chasing a lot of these candidates all over the state.
Yeah.
And some of them were out more than others.
Yeah, it was interesting. The Democrats, it seemed, were more accessible. At times we were critiqued, why are you ignoring the Republicans? And we would say, well, they don't send us press releases and tell us that they're doing this or that. They had more of a stealth campaign. Now, again, a lot of them spent a lot more time in the far-flung outskirts of the 2nd District, more conservative district. But the Democrats tended to have more press conferences, more plans. Again, Hannah Pingree, Nirav Shah, Troy Jackson, Shenna Bellows, particularly Shah and Pingree. I mean, it was like every week, here's my plan for this, here's my plan for that. But they all had tax plans, they all had affordability plans. But the Republicans came along and had some of that. Not as many. But Bobby Charles put out a 20-point plan later. Ben Midgley promised us a 24-point plan, and he talked about some specific plans. He had a very interesting child care proposal, by the way, which came up in one of the debates, where he talked about, I think uniquely, about having a tax write-off, both for providers, employers who might provide it on-site, like an on-site daycare, but also a larger tax write-off for parents who pay so much money for child care. So a lot of them had ideas and proposals which came out in the debates. Republicans had fewer public events that we were invited to.
I'm getting a neck cramp.
Yeah.
So I've got to
But
turn
we
to
covered
you.
them all. I mean, just speaking for myself for News Center Maine, I mean, we profiled all 12 candidates who made it to the finish line. Long interviews. If you're interested, they're still on.
They're still there.
You
Yeah.
introduced all of them on our streaming site, and we did pieces on all of them. And Christian and I kind of divided up the candidates in the last month, and wherever we could get to them, we did.
Our 207 team did candidate profiles as well. So
Rob
lots
Caldwell,
of coverage
Rob
on the
Caldwell,
candidates.
who co-moderated the 2 debates, sat down with every candidate he could get, which I think 207's always done. So it wasn't just our newscasts.
When we talk about plans, as you were just mentioning, of plans for economy or taxes, I think my memory is correct. I believe Ben Midgley, shortly before the primary, had mentioned, talking about plans, he was pushed on, and he said, if I win the primary, then I will reveal my plan.
Yeah, that's the 24-point plan I was referring to.
That stood out to me as very interesting. Okay, I can imagine what some strategy is there of, okay, well, let's get over the first hurdle, but isn't that also part of the selling point to get you over the first hurdle?
It could be. I mean, I think the other part of campaigns is not just your policy or your plans, but it's your biography. And I think Midgley leaned in heavily into his biography as a CEO who created more jobs than anyone else with the Crunch Fitness franchise, 15,000 jobs. And I think if you listen to him, particularly in the debates, I mean, he was chock full of statistics. Again, he said he had a good team, Lauren LePage and Brent Littlefield, who worked for Governor LePage, or Governor LePage's daughter as well, very well versed. Midgley was studied hard. And I think he showed in his interviews and in his events a great grasp of the statistics and so forth, and spending and how he could curb it.
We have Christian Harsa doing the wave. That something is happening. Let's check in there. Hi, Christian.
Hi, Brian and Amanda. So we just got the update that technical formatting issue has been rectified for Congressional District 2, the Democratic primary. So that just leaves those 2 smaller state legislative elections, the Senate District 4 and the House 58. That's District 58. Those 2 are the only ones remaining that should prevent us from being able to get those results. It sounds like both of the gubernatorial races and CD2 have been fully uploaded and are ready to go in that computer. So it's just leaving those 2 smaller races, which should, keyword should, move faster than these other races because they're much smaller geographic areas with less towns to go through, validate, and make sure are working right. Now, we don't have an estimate. We haven't been told that, but we are definitely getting closer, slowly ticking down the races that we have to make sure are validated and ready to go in that computer.
Christian, was there any consideration, if you know, as to perhaps delaying those two legislative races, given that we have only one governor and we have 181 seats in the legislature?
Can you just repeat that question real quick, Phil?
Yeah,
I didn't quite get that fully.
Was there any discussion there in perhaps delaying the process on these two legislative races?
Oh,
It didn't match all the other columns, so it messed up.
Repeat that one more time.
Sure. The initial in someone's name, in one of the columns there was not a dot, whereas the other columns had a dot,
And that was in CD2.
and that was in CD2. So we added the dot,
And that's what was
and
causing
that
this.
allowed it to validate.
There we go. Simple as punctuation. So pay attention in grammar school, kids.
all these little things.
Yeah, very little things in these formatting. I mean, anyone who's ever used Excel knows that if you don't have everything properly coded, it really does do that. Now, I assume that this is more complicated than Excel, but that same principle applies. It is really something as simple as that one period at the end of someone's name that can really throw everything off.
I think the point you were making, Phil, was
I was asking if there had been, I mean, it's sort of water under the bridge at this point, but did they consider, given the primacy of the governor's race, to, do that tonight and maybe CD2 and put off those two legislative races to next week since they're lower priority? No, you're shaking your head no.
No, that was never, as I'm aware, on the table. Because this program runs in milliseconds, I'm told, I believe the idea was to just get everything done. And just to remind everyone, we thought we might have the results Wednesday. There was even talk that we might even have it before Wednesday. I don't think it going into Friday, just now getting closer and closer to 2 a.m., I don't think this was a consideration until possibly now. So maybe if people knew what they know now, maybe that would have been a consideration. But I do think it's always just kind of been the goal to run everything all at once because it is pretty much instantaneous.
well, we did get that 2-hour warning at 9:18ish.
2 hours ago.
So
Should we tell them about the pool in the newsroom?
we can get to that because
We all lost. We all
Dana's
thought
the
this would
winner.
be.
I
We all
lost.
predicted
I
the
lost.
time and we all got it wrong. 'cause
Dana
it's-
actually is the winner. She guessed 150 or was it 150 or 1250? 1250 was the latest we had guessed. But anyway, you've got to imagine that because they expected 11:30 was when they would be done. At this point, it's just like, well, we're
here.
finishing.
We're
We're
doing
here.
it.
We're doing this. We're finishing.
Everyone, gather.
Now we're being told to gather.
Okay.
Here we go. We could have some action.
All right. We good? Are we ready?
Cam, you can take this full too.
Okay. Once again, my name is Kate McBrien. I'm the Chief Deputy Secretary of State. And I am very pleased. Okay, good? Okay. I am very pleased to say we are now ready to run the ranked choice tabulation for the June 2026 primary. I'm going to turn it over to Julie Flynn. But before I do that, I just want to take a quick second to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching on YouTube. But I mostly want to thank the amazing election staff who have stuck it out, who are here to see the results, who have done amazing work. For several months, they have been preparing the election, getting everything out to the municipalities, getting the opportunity to the voters to cast their vote and make their voice heard. And it is the work of these amazing people that make it all possible. So I'm really proud of the great work that they've done. All right. You ready, Heidi?
Yes.
We are ready.
Yes.
Good. Here we go.
We're doing, you're gonna tell me the order?
Governor Republican.
Governor Republican, okay.
we hit go. And there are results. And we have results.
What are the results?
I won.
Thank you, Julie. We needed that.
For those of them that didn't catch it, it is a paper jam holding us up. That's why I can't see others.
I mean, you can just go read it off. what you guys do.
I hand wrote it, which means now it's printing.
Okay. So the winner of the primary for Republican governor is Bobby Charles. James Libby was eliminated in the first round and his votes redistributed. Robert Wessels was eliminated in the second round. David Jones was eliminated in the third round. Owen McCarthy was eliminated in the fourth round. Garrett Mason was eliminated in the fifth round. Jonathan Bush was eliminated in the sixth round. Benjamin Midgley was the runner-up, and Bobby Charles was the winner. Okay, we're going to get you results for the Democratic governor now.
Copies? I'm going to ask you to hand them out.
Here, take one, pass it down.
No, Christian's on. Here's a couple more. Thank you. Well, Emily distributes some paper copies of the Republican gubernatorial race. We are now hitting go on the Democrat candidate for governor. We're getting more. Any more?
I think we've got that side.
And just to remind folks that the summary of all of these races will be posted on our website as well, and we'll email them out to all the campaigns and the press. They'll go out with our press release. But all of the public will be able to find them on the Secretary of State website at maine.gov/SOS.
Can I take a picture? Josh,
It's 50 plus 1%. And whatever percent it actually ended up being, I'm not sure, I didn't do the math.
50 plus one vote.
50,
50% plus one vote.
yeah. Okay. All right, Emily, can you step back?
So the winner of the Democratic primary for governor is Hannah Pingree. Angus King III was eliminated in the first round. Shenna Bellows was eliminated in the second round. Troy Jackson was eliminated in the third round, leaving Nirav Shah as the runner-up and Hannah Pingree as the winner.
This will get as well. Sorry,
More? We need more?
got you.
Well, those are getting distributed. We are now running Congressional District 2, Democrats.
So the winner of the Democratic primary for representative to Congress in District 2 is Matthew Dunlap. Paige Loud was eliminated in the first round. Jordan Wood was eliminated in the second round, leaving Joseph Baldacci as the runner-up and Matthew Dunlap as the winner.
Coming back.
CD2.
All right, we are now going to run Senate District 4.
Okay, obviously they're still about to run Senate District 4 and House District 58, but the three major ones just announced there. You actually said wow on at least one of them, so let's talk about it.
Well, we had two come from behind victories. Let's go in reverse order and build up the suspense. The last one was CD2. The closest of the three races where Matt Dunlap leapfrogged Joe Baldacci in the final round. He won by just 3,000 votes. I was just, before you turned to me, was trying to figure out the percentage, but that's just a little bit over 50% of the 67,000 votes cast. Dunlap, after Loud's votes and Wood's votes were allocated, he ended up at 35,924, and Joe Baldacci had 32,555. So after the first round, Baldacci had been ahead, but Dunlap leapfrogged him in the final ranked choice round.
And that's a close number there. Those are close numbers.
Very close. So Matt Dunlap, who had the temerity or guts, depending how you look at it, to announce he was running when Jared Golden was still there. He was going to challenge Golden in a Democratic primary before Golden decided he didn't want to seek a fifth term, has prevailed. In a way, a surprise because it was behind, and because Joe Baldacci sort of emerged in a way as the more establishment candidate. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in Washington got behind him. Right. Their so-called red to blue project, even though it's already a blue district, but leans red. But it didn't pan out for Senator Baldacci. That was certainly disappointing. We were talking about big names earlier, and I don't think we talked about him. His brother was not only a governor, but also was the congressman from this district. Yeah. So, in a way, a surprise. But Matt Dunlap, in his own right, very well known, 20 years in public life as a Secretary of State and state legislator. And then the other upset.
What you're seeing on your screen right now, just to clarify, is the
numbers?
Senate District 4 there.
Yeah.
That's.
There's still. We're talking over the last two Senate
better
races.
eyesight, I would be able to see what the. But hopefully those at home can see. Yeah.
Not to disrespect those two races, but we're really focused on the statewide races. And the other wow was Hannah Pingree. Which that result didn't surprise me as much because, well, the facts are she leapfrogged Nirav Shah, who was up by 8,000 in the first balloting. She ended up, when all the extra rounds were allocated, first Angus King, the third's votes, then Shenna Bellows' second and third round votes, Troy Jackson's votes, and no change in the standings. They were eliminated in the order that they were last to first. And then the final round was Hannah Pingree versus Nirav Shah, and she beat him. She ended up with 111,750 votes, which by my math was 56%. And Nirav Shah had 86,950 votes.
So by a considerable gap there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a comfortable win.
Right.
That's a comfortable win. And the reason I'm not surprised is polling and talking to people Hannah Pingree was a lot of people's second choice.
Right.
And certainly that proven in these results,
Right.
because it was the second choice votes that lifted her to victory.
And that was the party that was really pushing the ranked choice voting, using that to their
Utilizing
advantage.
that,
Yes.
right.
Yeah, their mutual advantage, they thought. I mean,
Right.
someone had to win. It was
Right.
very close in the first round. The top four were very well bunched together. But there was that movement in the final round.
And then the Republicans running for governor, that wasn't so surprising.
No, Bobby Charles held on. He had a very significant lead. He had 38% the first round. Ben Midgley and Jonathan Bush were way down 20% each, very close, those two. And again, as they explained, round by round, there was no change in the standings from 8th
Yes,
to
straight
first,
through.
really. Right,
Yeah.
straight through. Whoever was last was eliminated first. They went right up through it. Libby, Wessels, Jones, McCarthy, Mason. Bush did not leapfrog Ben Midgley.
Right.
We thought maybe possibility, some Owen McCarthy
They were so
votes, some
close.
David Jones was, who knows. But Midgley held on to second place, but couldn't catch Bobby Charles. And when all the second round votes were, second choice votes were allocated, Bobby ended up with 60%.
Okay.
Very significant,
Yeah, over that.
comfortable win. Similar to his comfortable lead after the first round.
Do you think we'll hear from some of these candidates tonight?
Look what just popped up in my email, Hannah Pingree's statement. Let's share that with our audience. It's quite long, I won't read all of it. After a year-long campaign and careful count, the results are in. I'm grateful, I'm ready, and there's no time to waste. This is what you were talking about.
right,
How
okay.
quickly will they get
Yeah.
out there?
Minutes.
I've spent 25 years serving the people of Maine, and the last year really brought home what service is about, because Mainers show up for each other in cities and towns. They never give up on their neighbors. Thank you to everyone who voted, volunteered, donated, or opened their doors to talk with me about what matters to them and what's at stake in this election. And she notes it was a crowded and competitive primary, and she's being very gracious in victory. I think we'll hear from her on camera maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning.
Okay.
But Hannah Pingree's not the resting type.
Yes, that's for sure. And we did hear from Bobby Charles earlier today, mostly talking about ranked choice voting, because we didn't obviously have the results just
Right,
yet.
right.
But he's certainly ready to hit the ground and campaign.
Right. He would have preferred not to wait, as he made clear. He doesn't like ranked choice voting. A lot of Republicans don't. If the rules had been, as they will be in November, plurality wins, don't need 50%, Bobby Charles would have been declared the winner on election night, June 9th. But he had to go through the process, but it worked out well for him. He had a very comfortable win, the most comfortable win of the three races we're looking at.
Yeah, well over that 50 for him compared to
I
the
got
others.
60% if I'm doing the math right, yeah.
Christian Harsa appears to be standing by in the tabulation room. We just saw those results as well. We want to try to check back in with him as well on what is happening in that room at this hour.
Let's start with the Senate District 4 and the House District 58, because we cut away from that. Do you have the results of those, Christian?
Yes, so I didn't actually jot those down, but I do have them right here. So that's governor.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Democrat, Republican. No, you're all good. I was taking down other notes while we were going through that. So the winner of the District 4 for Senator, that would be Chad Perkins. Now, the person dropped out in that last round, the third round, that would have been Joseph Gurin. And then the round, so let's go through how it actually would work out. So the first round, that would have been Gregory Pierce. He dropped out, and then his votes got allocated out, and then we go to Zachary Wood, and then the last person to drop out after Chad Perkins reached that 51% threshold, that would have been Joseph Gurin. So Chad Perkins, the winner of that primary, he's a Republican. He'll be facing off in that general election come November. Now, as in for the House District 58, the Republican primary there, so the first round we dropped out Jeffrey Harris, who was eliminated, and then in the second round we lost Dexter Bridges, and then, that's the winner, my apologies. The winner of it is Dexter Bridges, but the person who was dropped out was Lawrence Bessie. So we go, Jeffrey Harris was dropped, then Lauren Bessie was dropped out, making the winner Dexter Bridges for that House District 58. And so what I ran out, and actually the reason I didn't jot those down was to go talk with Hannah Pingree campaign staff, and they tell me that we'll be hearing from Hannah sometime tomorrow morning in Portland. What time exactly and where exactly in Portland and what time is still to be determined, but I was, as everyone was looking over here at the board, I was actually watching the campaign to see what the reactions would be, and immediately the top person here from the Pingree campaign jutted out the door right here. And I have the statement, thank you, Scout, behind the camera looking at that right now. So Phil was reading part of this right now. This is the first time I'm admittedly seeing it, but really what you're hearing is her saying thank you, but also this is where the quote, the real work begins. This campaign is about housing that allows young people to stay in Maine, one of those big top issues, as well as health care being another big issue. But her last message in this email before we probably hear from her the next time tomorrow morning in Portland, thank you, Maine. I look forward to seeing you all across our incredible state and earning your vote. Her, Bobby Charles are going to be facing off, but you can't forget that third candidate, Rick Bennett. He is unenrolled, running as an independent, and something that Bobby Charles was talking about earlier today at his press conference was because of ranked choice voting, which he doesn't like. He says it gave Rick Bennett an advantage to be able to have 8 days where he didn't have opponents, at least not known opponents. So that gave him time to run and be able to go through that. And Phil, you were actually at one of those events earlier this week, and you were talking a little bit more about that. But introduce some of the people who don't know who Rick Bennett is to who Rick Bennett is and what he's running on.
Well, he's running on being nonpartisan. He considers Washington and Maine close behind it becoming too hyperpartisan and dysfunctional. As you know from covering the State House, one example of what used to be a bipartisan thing is the budget. And the budget, certainly this year, it was passed only with Democratic majority, very few, if any, Republican votes. And well, that's okay. Democrats have a majority. That's legal. That's often not the way things have been done in the past. So Rick Bennett, longtime Republican, was once a co-president of the state Senate, was once chair of the Republican Party back when Paul LePage was governor in the 2010s, has spent a total of 12 years in the Senate, but he left the party last year. He unenrolled. And so he's an unenrolled or independent candidate, but he has a record that will be looked at. He's fairly polished presenter. He has plans. Like Hannah Pingree has plans, housing. It's funny because they all agree, whatever the differences, ideological differences in the party, they tend to agree on those top 5 things: housing, healthcare, childcare, taxes, energy costs. Like the pillars of affordability are similar, though in the details they're certainly going to have different approaches.
By the way, I want to bring this up because you brought up Paul LePage in the CD2 race there. We just got a statement from the National Republican Congressional Committee saying, quote, Paul LePage is a proven fighter for Maine families. As governor, he lowered their taxes, secured their benefits, and created jobs. Meanwhile, incompetent radical Matt Dunlap has let fraud run rampant in Augusta and embraces an extreme agenda that would hike taxes, make health care access more difficult, and push woke gender ideology on kids. Contrast couldn't be clearer, and Mainers will send Paul LePage to Congress in November. Again, that's from the National Republican Congressional Committee.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a lot of what Vice President J.D. Vance was saying when he was here last month for a rally to talk mainly about fraud, and he a couple of big shout-outs to Governor LePage, though for some reason Governor LePage wasn't on stage with J.D. Vance. We didn't get that photo op, which puzzled me. But clearly the administration, the National Republican groups are behind LePage, and that's important because that would be a flip. And CD2 is one of the few real non-gerrymandered battleground states left in this country. And the House majority right now is like 3 seats. Republicans are being forecast to lose that, but if Paul LePage can flip that district, that would give Republicans a chance of holding their House majority.
We also have the Maine Democratic Party responding to Bobby Charles being the Republican.
They've just been waiting all night to hit send on these emails.
They've all been waiting. And they say, quote, Bobby Charles is a Donald Trump minion who wants to bring the MAGA agenda to Maine. Charles' dangerous agenda, which includes an unrealistic state budget proposal, kicking Mainers off of Maine care, rolling back abortion rights, and rubber stamping the Trump economy that has led to higher grocery, electricity, gas, and health care costs are out of touch with Maine families. That's from the Democratic Party, the Maine Democratic Party.
Yeah, and they're going to have a press conference tomorrow also to speak in the flesh about what they think of the race. So we'll see the Democrats. We'll hear from Hannah Pingree. As Bobby Charles said, I'll see you tomorrow. And I think we're going to hear from Rick Bennett tomorrow also. So it's day one of the general election,
right?
Juneteenth.
Christian, we'll give you last word here because you're the one who's been in the thick of it all day.
Yeah, definitely. So it's been a long 5 days, and this, yes, as Phil said, is the start to the general election. There's definitely some crestfallen faces here as we learn the results of all of this, but something that may or may not have been caught for those is the thanks that was given to the people who have been working on this. It's been a very long week for them. If not, it's been a very long election season for how much airtime and importance this election has gotten. And so we're definitely going to be right back doing all of this for the general election. But I have been here for more hours than I can count off the top of my head. Ryan and Amanda, I think I can toss it back to you guys one more time. But if you want to talk more, I'm happy to.
Please come home, Christian.
Yes. Thank you for all the work there.
Yes. And again, just to recap who our winners are tonight, let's go through that list again if we could.
So Hannah Pingree won the Democratic primary for governor. Bobby Charles won the Republican primary for governor. And Matt Dunlap won the Democratic primary in the 2nd Congressional District. Dunlap will face Paul LePage, who is uncontested in the general election. And Pingree and Charles also have independent Rick Bennett, Senator Bennett, also on the ballot, just those three. And no ranked choice voting in November.
Right.
It'll be a plurality election.
We'll know a little sooner.
Move much faster, for sure.
That sounds very good.
Want to thank you for joining us for our special coverage of this tonight.
The morning report starts in just over 2 hours at 4:30. Have a great night.